Well, good evening and welcome. The hour being after 6:45 p.m., it's my high honor and privilege to call the December 9th, 2021 School Committee meeting to order. Our first order of business is the Pledge of Allegiance. Representative Cameron, would you lead us?
Of course. All right. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you and welcome. We have a packed agenda this evening. Our first item under the agenda is our favorite item, which is recognitions of our students and staff. This evening we have Ms. Peyton Warenberg, who is an Elm Street School Grade 5 student. She's accompanied by Jessica Simpson. Dr. Goff, if you'd like to introduce her.
Sure. Peyton is a grade 5
down.
student who helps with kindergarten dismissal every afternoon. She really goes above and beyond to help these students transition at the end of the day. Peyton's kindness and unselfish assistance is greatly appreciated, and Ms. Simpson will speak to Peyton's positive and encouraging daily contributions to the Elm Street school community. So we said Peyton definitely soars.
Hi, everybody. My name is Jessica Simpson. I am the school counselor over at Elm Street. I'm actually the one who nominated Peyton. She is, as you might say, my right-hand student at the end of the day. She helps me collect the 5 grades or the 5 classrooms for the kindergarten students, and we transition them from their classroom to the bus area. As you can imagine, that is not an easy feat. And you know, I sometimes wonder if the kindergartners actually know the difference between Peyton and the adults. There are times where I won't be there at the end of the day or another teacher won't, and we'll say, oh, Peyton knows. If you ask Peyton, she'll let you know what the deal is. So she is so helpful with helping them zipper their coats, going down to the bathroom, and just keeping them occupied as we wait. In our soaring lessons for guidance, she is always an active participant. She always has thoughtful contributions, and she is just really the epitome of what we think of when we think of an Elm Street Eagle. So we are really proud of her, and just, you know, we can only hope for more Peytons. So.
Ms. Warenberg, please, if you'd like to step forward and address the committee.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for your leadership. Questions or comments from the committee? Mrs. Gallivan.
We just wanted to say that what you do is really important, and it's good to show really young kids that students can be leaders. I'm a big believer in student leadership, and I just think that when the first person steps forward, then somebody else might step forward and say, I'm going to help out in another way or in this way. So what you're doing is really an important thing, and we admire it. So thank you for being here.
Thank you very much. Further questions or comments? What? Dr. Goff?
Thank you. Peyton, I'm really happy that you're doing this, and thank you for your dedication and commitment, because that's what it is. Just a quick story is that I vividly remember that when I was in 5th grade, my teacher, Ms. Shavaro, chose myself and another student to go down to the kindergarten classroom and to read to them. And we did that once a week. And it held such an impression on me that, you know, I became a teacher. And the other student who was with me, Miss Nielsen, also became a teacher. Yeah. So it just shows that the impact, and I'm really glad that you're doing that. So maybe that's the profession you'll go in someday, or you'll be sitting up here. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Peyton. And as a 5th grader, you have a lot more time with us in the school district, and we look forward to you coming back before us again, because we know and trust you're just going to continue the good work in our town and our school district. Thank you very much. Thanks for joining us tonight. Our next order of business is our high school student report. We have Mr. Scotty Cameron, Walpole High School's representative. Mr. Cameron.
All right. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. My name is Scotty Cameron. I'm a senior at Walpole High School this year. I'm happy to report that Walpole High School is very busy as we're approaching winter break. Starting with sports, Walpole High School's winter sports teams just began last week, and members of the wrestling team, basketball team, hockey teams, and winter track teams are hopeful for a mostly regular season after last year's modified schedule. Additionally, National Honor Society and Community Service Club are planning a fundraising event to see which club can raise the most money for their respective charities. National Honor Society is raising money for the National Diaper Bank, and Community Service Club is raising money for Pine Street Inn. Furthermore, math team has started off with a bang this season, placing 6th in their first 2 months of competition. They hope to continue their success with their next meets in the next month. Moreover, the music department has been very busy these past few weeks as they have 2 upcoming concerts. The first concert is a week from today, which will feature the chorus, band, jazz band, and orchestra. And if you're not able to attend that concert a week from today, there's also another concert that following Friday, which will feature other students in a coffee house, which is more individual pieces. Additionally, speech and debate has began competing in person again this month, and they finished 5th in their tournament last weekend. They also hope to continue their success throughout the rest of the season. Also, Best Buddies recently hosted a screening of the movie Elf last week, where they were also able to collect donations for the Walpole the Walpole Food Pantry. And lastly, GSA, the Gender Sexuality Alliance, held an open discussion on the school environment this past week. I attended the event, and it was terrifically run, and there was a lot of faculty and students there, which really speaks to the faculty and students creating an open learning environment, and it speaks to the dedication of the faculty and helping the students learn. So that's all I have. I would be happy to answer any questions at this time, but if not, thank you.
Questions for Representative Cameron from the committee? Seeing none, thank you very much, Scotty. We appreciate the update, and we just did get the entire music schedule to us this afternoon, so we're excited for those. Very good. We now move on to the business part of our meeting, and you are all very welcome to stay for our math update, but we understand if you have other obligations, so thank you very much. We'll take a 30-second recess. Yes.
Just to support me. Isn't that sweet? That's really nice.
What?
Adorable.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Our first order of new business is an out-of-country field trip request. We have information to be provided soon. We have Mr. Richard Sturgis from the high school to present. Mr. Sturgis, please come on down.
Thank you. I'm Rich Sturgis. I teach at the high school in the World Language Department, and I want to thank you for honoring my request to speak at this meeting. I'm here this evening to request your permission to take Walpole High School students on a 9-day tour through the country of Peru in February 17th to 25th of 2023. This trip is run by local student travel company EF Education First, which is in Cambridge. And our tour, the plan of the tour is to travel first to the capital city of Lima, and then later to visit the historical city of Cusco and the major tourist locations and sites that are in that part of the country. Walpole High School has an established relationship with EF. The World Language Department has run trips to Spain with EF over the last several years, most recently in 2019. Our science department has also taken students abroad with them to countries such as Ecuador, Peru, the Dominican Republic, and Tanzania for service learning opportunities. Over the trips with the World Language and Science departments, the reviews of our students have been overwhelmingly positive, and we've had very good experiences in the past with these trips. We are looking to chaperone anywhere from 12 to 20 students, and with your approval, we'll begin the process of informational meetings and registrations later this month and in the new year. The plans for myself and my colleague Kate Bacon to accompany students during this trip in February of 2023. On this tour in Peru, students will have the opportunity to explore aspects of modern Peru, which is mainly represented in the capital of Lima, as well as the indigenous Incan communities that are in the mountainous regions of the country. Themes such as culinary traditions of Peru and daily life of Peru will also be explored. EF ensures that its tours contain a healthy balance of cultural education, sightseeing, and activities that promote global awareness and interaction with local residents. Along with assuring students' well-being, Mrs. Bacon and I will serve as models and will encourage students to utilize Spanish and to develop their linguistic and cultural knowledge while on the tour. The benefits of this travel experience will last much longer than the students' high school years. Students will have the opportunity to put what they learn in the classroom here in Walpole to use in a real-world setting. Additionally, students will gain valuable cultural perspectives and impactful experiences that happen when traveling abroad. Our hope is that students realize that their ability to communicate in the target language is a key which will unlock countless opportunities in the future and which will inspire them become towards being global citizens as they become adults. I will address any questions, but thank you very much for your attention to this request.
Thank you, Mrs. Sturgis. Questions from the committee? Ms. Denizio, Mr. Hearn, and Mrs. Gallivan.
Thank you so much for giving of your own time and effort to give our students this opportunity. I think it's wonderful to open these doors for our students. Just a couple questions. You talked about outreach starting this school year for the trip. Would that include this year's 8th graders? Are there plans to advertise the trip to them since they'll be in 9th grade?
Yes, because at the point of the trip, they will be in 10th grade. No.
9.
They'll be 9th graders,
Yeah.
yes. So, yes, we will include in our outreach the current 8th grade students.
Okay, great. And then just one more question. A question I always ask when these opportunities come up in front of us is how do we open the opportunity to up to as many students as possible, because it is a pretty significant financial cost.
Yes.
And we want to make sure that nobody, that everyone has the opportunity to fund it if they can.
Equity is a very important issue, yes.
I really like that you're giving so much lead time, because I think that helps a lot to address that issue. But I'm just curious what outreach might be done or what opportunities might be available to let students know of financial support to assist them in perhaps being able to take the trip.
Sure, I can address this question in two ways. First, EF has a program for students to have a equivalent of a GoFundMe, where over time they promote their trip on social media, and they have ways to outreach so that they can get support as they're preparing for the finances in the trip. We will also be looking internally for funds that will help us either defray the costs for all of the students or to support students in particular financial need who are interested in this trip. So we'll be looking with my own administrators at the high school, but also internally through our own fundraising opportunities, or fundraising efforts, I should say, so that that defrays the cost, because it is a significant cost and it's a big decision to make.
I appreciate that you're keeping an eye on that, and I think maybe a good metric to use, just as you're sort of looking at who might be expressing interest in the opportunity or approaching you, we track what percentage of our students are considered economically high need, and
Sure.
looking at whether the students who express interest are reflective of the various demographics, if it matches up or if with kind of the population at large, or if you're noticing any disparities.
We will keep an eye on that as
So
well.
I appreciate that. So
Yeah.
thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Newsom. Mr. Ahern.
Is there an application process or first come, first serve?
We are going to hold informational meetings, and we have a presentation that's provided to us about EF, which goes over the details of the trip, the costs, the payment plans that are involved in the trip, and from there, I think the way we're going to work with it is we're going to see what the interest is first, and then work from there. Sometimes it's a matter of we have a tremendous amount of interest, and we have to work with that. And other times it's we're trying to get up to a certain number. So EF's policy is for 6 students to be accompanied by 1 chaperone. So that's why I'm specifying the 12 to 20 is our ideal number. We're going to see where it goes from there. In the past couple of trips, we've gotten to that 12 number and have been in the 12 to 15 range. So that's over 3 or 4 trips. That's what we've experienced with these world language trips abroad. It's a little bit higher with the language department, with the science department. And their trips, they're a little different than ours. So we're going to gauge it. But if it is a larger number, we will look into getting additional chaperones. We have a couple in the world language department who are interested and are always open to see.
That's nice. One additional question that just walked out of my mind for a moment. So are there other opportunities for students to participate in these experiences? I mean, this is a pretty robust experience. Like, is there smaller scale trips or experiences, like more locally, that happen? And this is not just necessarily about this, but just the general flow of the world language department to experience the language.
In the district, I'm aware that there is a middle school trip that goes to Quebec. I'm not sure if that's still a thing. I'm not.
Not this year.
It hasn't run this year, but historically that has run, so it's a more local experience. With the World Language Department, the Latin program has had trips to Italy. So there are, in the World Language Department, yes, there are other trips, and also in the high school, there have been history trips to Europe as well. So we offer different opportunities, yes. But as far as with Spanish, and specifically to Spanish and Latin American countries, this is the one that we orchestrate. And before the pandemic, we've had 3 consecutive trips to Spain with the trip. So it is something that we hope to do annually. And so if a student isn't able to go on a trip for one reason or another, one year, they have a few other opportunities down the road.
Thank you.
Mrs. Gallivan.
Yeah, I have a couple. Thank you for being here tonight, and thank you, as Ms. Denizio said, thank you for doing this, because this is above and beyond, and we really do appreciate that.
Yeah, students appreciate it too. when they
Yeah,
do
no,
trips.
you're right. And I just wanted to say to Carrie, I know giving the students a year's worth of lead time, I know that helps kids to save their money for it and to get a job and specifically put their money away. I remember hearing of a kid who went on 2 trips, and he self-funded because he just wanted to go so much, but the lead time really helps, so I think that's really good. My first question is about the health of the world right now and COVID, and what does EF say to you about, collecting money and refunds and that sort of stuff? I mean, hopefully by February of next year, it's almost well, it's much less of an issue, let's put it that way.
That's right, and their fingers are crossed that by 10 or how many months is that? Be 14 months from now, that things are a lot more improved. Well, our last experience, you might remember us being here 2 years ago when we were planning to go on a April 2020 trip to Peru, and this didn't happen, as we know. So EF it was a very tricky time for them, and they were able to recompensate the people who had signed up for that program.
Okay.
And since then, they have been running programs, so there hasn't been a need for any cancellations of programs. I have a contact person at EF, so I don't know with the current policies. They have one policy which involves the ability to sign up for a program by a certain date, and then if there is a need to back out of it, you can do that for a full refund by a certain other date. I'm not sure how that would be affected with our program because the date for refund is still significantly far away from the trip itself.
See.
So I think their policies are still in flux given what the global situation is, but I can readdress it with my contact person at EF. And,
Yeah, I think you just need to be super clear with the families before money gets, given to you.
exchanged, right.
Exactly what is at risk, just so that they know.
Sure.
And then, two other things. You realize our policy is 2 chaperones have to go on an overseas trip.
Yes, we
But-
will not run it if it's under 12.
Okay. And yeah, it's 1 per 10. So if you were to go into the 20s, that would require a 3rd chaperone.
Right, and it would be a 3rd anyway because
Because
EF's
EF would
policy is
tell you,
1 per
okay,
6.
yeah.
Yep.
And then the last thing was, I remember some trips had a community service component. Is that what you were talking about when you talked about the science department?
The science
does that?
department does have a
Okay.
community service component. Ours is more culturally and linguistically oriented.
Gotcha,
Okay,
okay.
so there's many things where you're interacting with the local cultures, but also practicing your language. So it's, there's not the specific service component, it's just the way the programs are designed by EF.
Yeah, it sounds great. Thank you very much for doing it.
Ms. Galvin, thank you.
Further questions from the committee? Dr. Goff?
No, can you just repeat those dates, though? Because
Yes,
it's
February
community
7th,
event.
Friday, February 17th to Saturday, February 25th, 2023.
You'll need that for the vote, right?
Ms. Denizio?
I will make a motion to approve an out-of-country field trip to Peru for the dates February 17th to February 25th, 2023.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Denizio, second by Ms. Syrek. All those in favor? Abstained? Chair will call Mr. Breen.
I vote yes.
Motion carries, 600. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much. Have a good evening, everybody.
You too.
You as well. Thanks for coming out. Our next order of new business is a math curriculum update. We will have Mr. Jonathan Rodolphe, our new math department chair, to provide us with a math curriculum update. We also have Ms. Julie Chin and Jill Masterson to provide us with a math update of what's going on at the middle schools. Please come forward.
Doing middle school first. All right, I guess I'm controlling the keys to the kingdom here, so just let me know, and I'm gonna kind of move this to,
Good evening. I'm Jill Masterson, the math coach at Johnson Middle School. This is Julie Chin, the math coach at Bird Middle School. Thank you for the opportunity to share with you the work we are doing in the math department at the middle school level. We have really 4 major points that we want to address this evening. 3 are kind of rooted in data, Mcas, our use of iReady, our development and use of common assessments, and the changes that we've made to the curriculum in response to this data. You can go ahead. You can go one more. Perfect. So Julie and I took a deep look into our Mcas data, and some of the key ideas that we know from looking at this is that we do continue to have a weakness in geometry. We also noticed a weakness in probability at the 7th grade level. Our strengths are rooted in rates and proportions, and we have some skill weaknesses with critical thinking problems, not specific to any content, and problems involving number lines. Some of the things that we have done in response to this data is we have rewritten the curriculum maps for all grade levels, including math connections at the 6th grade level, some with more significant changes than others this year. We are building in opportunities to give students more exposure to critical thinking problems to address those weaknesses in those skill areas. We're using more MCAS type questions on our common assessments to give students additional exposure to these deeper thinking problems that they're being presented with on the MCAS assessments. And we are continuing to support our teachers by providing collaborative time to develop more enrichment activities and problem-solving activities for students to participate in within the classroom as well.
So the first thing we were going to do is I just wanted to show you a couple of sample grade 7 math MCAS questions just so you can see what is expected of the students. I think it's a little eye-opening. Every year that goes by, the questions seem to get a little bit more complex and are asking a lot more of them. So the first question, I won't make you read the whole thing, but breaks it down into 3 parts. The first part, very straightforward, asking the students to find the area. Second one takes it up a little bit. They are expected to find the volume, which again is fine, except they also have to convert a measurement at the same time. And then the third is quite complex. The third one, they have to change a measurement, find a missing dimension, and then they have to, once they find the missing dimensions, they have to decide which one would meet the requirements of the perimeter. So they're really being asked to do 3 things in Part C alone. And so what we're noticing is the questions that they're struggling more with are the ones that are more similar to Part C. We're asking a lot of questions like Part A and Part B in class, but we're trying to get the teachers to ask more questions like the more in-depth level of complexity that we see there. If you go to the next slide, it's just another grade 7. I'll just go through them quickly. You don't need to solve them all, but the next one, it appears much more straightforward because there's obviously far less language. They have to find why. What you probably don't know, because you haven't done 7th grade math in a while, is really it would be like 3 steps for them to get there. They have to know about supplementary angles, they need to know about the triangle sum theorem, and they need to know about vertical angles just to find this y. And we're trying to get them away from, this is a multiple choice question, I don't know what to do, so I'm just going to guess the first thing. How we're getting them away from that is, if you go to the next slide, this is a question that has come up on MCAS before, and this is a question that we actually used on Common Assessment this year. And we talked about whether we should get rid of the multiple choice component or not, and we decided to leave the multiple choice, but we also award partial credit for work on their Common Assessment. We're trying to get them in the habit of showing work so that when they encounter a question like this, they don't automatically just guess. Typically, a question like this, a couple years ago would have been, given this radius, what would be the area of the mirror? Now they're asking them to say, given this circumference, it's not directly stated. They have to find the radius, then apply that to find the area of the mirror. So there's really 2 steps at play, and they're not telling them what that middle piece is. And so then the final question in this is just like how we're progressing. This isn't an MCAS question, but this is one that we are using because obviously there's only a certain bank of MCAS questions, and we're trying to sprinkle them throughout our common assessments, try and do like 2 per common assessment. But then we want to start writing questions that are similar to that, so they have more exposure. So this question shows a more conceptual level of understanding versus procedural, which is what we're looking for. They're asked to find how much fencing they would need to enclose the lawn. So nowhere in the question is it directly stated that they have to find the perimeter. And too often, those are the tests that we were designing. Find the perimeter of this shape, find the area of this shape. So now we're trying to give them questions that really see, do they really understand the concept? If we say this, what does that mean? And then it also adds another piece to it. They have to find the missing dimensions before they find the perimeter. Okay. So this is something that we're working towards, and we feel that by doing this on the Common Assessment, we're also hoping that this is encouraging teachers, and we're working with them to write these type of questions so that they're instructing with them, so that they're not like a secondary afterthought, like do all the drill and then do the application. We want them like presenting lessons with questions like these embedded, so kids get more familiar with them.
All right. We try not to live entirely on the Mcas data, as it's just that one-time opportunity. So a few years back, we built in the use of a program called iReady that serves as our diagnostic for 3 times throughout the year. Our students took the first diagnostic in September. They will take it again at the end of January, and the 3rd time in June. We are hoping that this year will be the year that we have an uninterrupted use of iReady with normal presentation to students, not at home this time and in school another time. What we are doing is using the data from iReady, which we will get even more from when the students take it a second time, and we can really see the growth data that is presented from it. But with the data that we received initially, we did a brief analysis. We looked at strengths and weaknesses, and we tried to find ways that we could do some work within specific units to make effort to improve those areas of weaknesses and to build on the areas of strength as well. Within our PLCs, we have worked with teachers to better understand how they can use the reports that are provided by iReady to inform their instruction. There are multiple reports that support differentiation efforts within the classroom. And I've also we've worked to share this with our special ed teachers, as well as there are reports that really break down the prerequisite skills, the pre-teaching opportunities that some of our students need to be successful with current content. What you see on this slide is just a quick overview of big picture data for both of our schools. This breaks down by the 4 main strands: number and operations, algebra and algebraic thinking, measurement and data and geometry, an idea of where our students are at, with green obviously being good, and red being our students that are falling below grade level by more than 1 grade. So this gives us the opportunity to see our schools are pretty comparable between Byrd and Johnson. We have similar strengths, similar weaknesses, which Julie will share a little bit more about.
So overall, the strengths for all 3 grades in both schools seem to be in measurement and data. Approximately 64% of the students are at or above grade level in this domain. The weakness is actually not very surprising, because it's a trend that we've seen over the past couple of years, and we've actually started shifting our curriculum to address it, and iReady supports it, is that geometry continues to be a weakness at both schools. Approximately 57% of the students are 1 or more grade levels below in this domain. We had already seen this over the past couple of years, and so we had decided to make some movements. And so one of the changes we made was we took all of the data analysis, statistics, and probability out of all 3 grades, and we moved it into Math Connections. Now, we couldn't do it all at once because, not everybody would have had it, so we're slowly moving it down. So this 6th grade is getting all 3 years of data analysis, statistics, and probability as part of their Math Connections class. That way, it's going to free up some time for the regular math teachers to focus on more concepts that the kids are struggling with, like geometry. And it actually benefits the Math Connections, because we really want that class to be more real-world application, and data analysis, statistics, probability, all those topics tend to lend themselves well to lessons like that. So we're hoping to see positive effects out of that. That's one change that we made. The other major shift we had done prior to this was we had decided that we were going to move geometry earlier in the year. We tend to rush it, and it gets done right before the MCAS in maybe March, which is good. It's fresh in their mind, but we're rushing to get through things. So a lot of other districts we found are starting the years off with it. We met with one professional development consultant who suggested it as well. So we started all 3 grades off in term 1 with some sort of geometry topics. And the whole idea is that we're going to spiral those geometry topics throughout the year. So it's not just like a one and done. The kids are fresh right now. We're introducing it. We're focusing mostly on the concepts, and then we're going to do the application through other units as we go. And I have other examples as we go through, and we can show you.
So before we get a little bit further into some of those curriculum changes that we talked about, I just wanted to share just a brief overview of one of the reports that we've really trying to push with our teachers that really create some of those differentiation opportunities. This is a prerequisite report. It actually breaks down student levels based on skills they need for grade level content. So a grade 6 teacher can go in and pick a topic that they're working on, and this report will break down the prerequisite skills, and we'll even identify ones that they deem essential, and gives them 3 to 4 groups depending on the particular skill and the needs of the students. Group A being students that have met those prerequisite skills and have shown some strength with them. Group B being ones that could use a little additional support but aren't doing too badly. And Group C being students that really need more pre-teaching, more opportunities to revisit these skills that they've seen before moving into this new content fully. For them to be successful. This is one that we're trying to encourage our special ed teachers to use as well, to provide those supports even outside of math class for students to see review opportunities that will benefit them with the new content that they are learning. The next slide will get us into a little bit better picture for you of what we've done with our curriculum. This is a very brief breakdown of the units for all 4 of our courses, the 3 grade levels, and then the connections course as well. You can see that I've highlighted there the geometry that we've pushed to the forefront. In grade 7, it is all geometry for all of term 1. Grade 6, it starts with geometry, and the way that we did that, I'm going to get into a little more in depth in a moment. Grade 8, we open with equations because that's a consistent thread for them throughout all of 8th grade, but then it shifts into some geometry with transformations. With connections, that's the one exception. We have some geometry that comes up in the springtime, an opportunity for our 6th graders to revisit those geometry skills that they learned in term 1, but to apply them more to have these real world opportunities as they revisit those concepts that they saw earlier in the year. The next slide gives you just a little bit more in-depth breakdown of what it is that our goal was with doing this. So this is for 6th grade. In Unit 1 in 6th grade, they covered area, surface area, and volumes using whole numbers specifically. Then in Unit 2, the 6th grade teachers progressed into a unit dealing with fraction and decimal operations, which created an opportunity for them to continue to present students with geometry questions, now building in decimal side lengths and fractional side lengths into those questions that they were seeing in the first unit. And then that allows for that reinforcement, and also it allows teachers to give an increased level of complexity with those questions, because students have now had more than a full unit of those types of questions. And then in connections, we come back to geometry in Unit 6, where they have an opportunity to spiral back to concepts from term 1, but also to provide those application-based questions, and really gives our students an opportunity to have more hands-on problem-solving opportunities.
The next slide is just the sample questions of what Jill was referring to. Very straightforward. The Unit 1 Common Assessment question, these are all grade 6 questions. It was find the volume of the rectangular prism. We're just looking for, do they have a basic understanding of what they're supposed to do? In Unit 2, we moved away from geometry. We've moved on to operations with fractions and decimals. But we're going to use this as an opportunity to revisit geometry. So now we have that question again, but we have fractions involved. So we're going to use, and I'll show you in a second, the item analysis that we do for our common assessment. So we're going to use this to try and track our data and say, are the kids retaining it? Where are they going wrong? Is it with the geometry concepts, or is it with the fractions? And then if you look down below, the application question, these are the questions I had mentioned earlier with the perimeter. Again, it's not asking them to find the volume. It's implying it by saying how many cubic inches of cereal will fit inside the box. So this shows us a greater depth of understanding, not just can they pick out the right formula, do they understand what they're asking. On the next page, this is a sample of the item analysis that we do for each common assessment. We have 3 students. Obviously, these are not 3 real students, these are us. These are not our scores either, just so you know. Mr. Hahn did not get the kite area question wrong. But this is what we do for all the students for every common assessment. And so we're just looking to see, did they meet the standard? Did they partially meet the standard, or did they not meet the standard at all? And so we have the standard at the top, and so we'll look at this volume question again for Unit 2. And say, okay, are our percents the same? What's going on? Are we making improvements, or are we going down? And then we're going to show you, after this next slide, we'll show you a couple of ways that we use this item analysis.
Yes, and for this slide, again, it compares the 2 schools, and it offers us the opportunity, that slide you just saw from Julie, gives us the opportunity to look at our individual schools, to look at individual students and grade levels. These graphs, what that we did is we took a breakdown of the entire assessment. So this shows the entire assessment, meeting, partially meeting, not meeting, and it gives us an opportunity to look at the 2 schools. And what we do, and you can go to the next slide, is that we're trying to figure out, a comparison between us, not looking to compare the 2 schools truly, but to see, where are things going well, where are the areas that we need to improve. And if one school has a specific strength over the other, what can we do to provide teachers opportunities to help each other, to look back at what they've done and how it may have been more successful than something else, and something that other teachers can try going forward. So we have a couple samples of questions that we broke down in comparing those schools and looking at what it is that we can do. This first question is a 7th grade question, and School A had a much higher percent of students that partially met the standard, but the schools were closer with the percent of students that met the standard. So what we would want to see is, are there grading inequities somewhere? Have teachers take a look at the rubric, sit down together and look at the assessments and see, what does this partially meeting look like and how are we differing across the board? The second sample is a 6th grade question, and in this particular example, School A outscored School B. Here's an example of an opportunity for the teachers from School A to support the teachers from School B, where they can provide examples of activities that they did that students really might have grabbed onto and showed a better understanding as a result of. Or they maybe just had a certain way of presenting particular information that may have helped the students a little bit better. So giving our teachers collaborative opportunities to support one another when these situations show up.
Okay, and then the last sample analysis we have is a sample from grade 8. It doesn't fit the geometry. Well, I guess it does kind of fit the geometry concept directly, but if you want to just stay on this slide, I'll just read the next analysis. So on this particular question, students scored low on this question in both schools and at both levels. The data that you see is for on level, but there was a similar question on the advanced test that students struggled with as well. We decided that students are having difficulty writing algebraic expressions and equations from word problems. So now, what are we going to do with this? We're going to use this information to continue to develop students' ability to write these equations. And if you skip 2 slides forward, here's an example of what we would do to further develop these skills. So these same skills come up again in Unit 3. When we do linear equations, they're expected to write equations from word problems again. In Unit 5, when they do geometry, again, and we talk about angles, they have to do it through writing equations. In Unit 6, we're doing systems of equations. Everything goes back to that. So there'll be plenty of practice throughout the year for them to work on this, but it's important that we identify that that was a weakness right at the beginning so that we can now target it. So we've given you a lot of information in a short amount of time. So what are our next steps? Just a quick summary. These are our plans for the year. We're going to be working with teachers to create opportunities to spiral back to concepts, because especially this year more than ever, this is what we need to do. We can't stop. We just need to keep revisiting. Okay, we touch upon it and then we apply later on. We're going to work as a department using common assessment data to create opportunities for teachers to support one another in improving instruction, which is the slide that Jill had just talked about. We will continue to analyze student data to monitor proficiency of skills, and we're going to continue to seek opportunities for professional development for both math teachers and for the coaches. So I think we're going to let John speak, and then we'll take questions as a group at the end, if that's okay.
Good evening. My name is John Rodolfi. I'm the math department chair. Thank you for the opportunity to share with you our progress, some of our goals and targets as well, and some of the things that we're doing. Before I get started, I just want to say I'm thrilled to be part of the Walpole team and really excited to work with a really strong, amazing, and dedicated department. I'm going to kind of do a brief introduction, tell you a little bit about myself and kind of how that guides my goals and my beliefs, and then talk about AP data, Mcas data, some of the interventions and other strategies that we have, and finally kind of some of our goals and targets. So I've been in education for about 17 years. I started as a paraprofessional and spent a lot of my time each day with some students that had some really significant challenges, and they could still achieve at a high level and have a lot of success. And that helped me really understand it. If students are invested and they're given the supports that they need, that every student can achieve. And that's really probably my #1 foundational belief. I also believe that not only for math, but just in the real world in general, students have to have the skill of critical thinking. And I think that's our responsibility to encourage, promote that, get them sharing their work, talking through their process, that it's not really just the answer that matters, but it's how they get there and to develop that skill. It also allows them to struggle. Failure temporary failure, I should say, is totally okay. We learn from it. We learn how to overcome obstacles, and they learn how to be successful in math and in career, college, and all kinds of other areas. I'm a big believer in vertical alignment. I've worked at middle schools and high schools, so it's really important that students and teachers have a smooth transition from one grade to the next. Teachers know what skills students have and what comes next. And students, kind of as they make the transitions, especially grade 8 to 9, middle school to high school, very important transition year for them. Different expectations, just whole different approach. So it's something that, and again, I will speak about all of these as we move along. And then I am a huge data person. It should inform our decisions. Everything that we decide, anything of significance, we should be looking at data, let it inform our instructions, let it inform our curriculum, inform our professional development, and essentially every significant decision that we make. If we have some data that can support it and direct us in the proper direction, we should be using it. I think we can move on. So we'll start with the advanced placement. Our AP enrollment has been increasing pretty significantly, as the numbers will show in the next slide. Our performance did dip slightly due to COVID as far as the scores, but we still did outperform the state in the global measures. And it's possible the 2021 results may have also been influenced by the fact that the students took AP courses the first semester and then didn't have any direct coursework for the last 3 months leading into the exam because College Board did not change their schedule. So we saw a little bit of a dip, but nothing too significant. And the vast majority of scores are eligible, of our students are achieving scores that are eligible at most colleges. It's great to see that we have more students challenging themselves. Everyone may not pass, but they're getting valuable exposure to college material and college rigor. Just an example that I like to share, when I first started teaching AP, wasn't the best at it yet, and I had a student get a 1, and it was disappointing for her, it was disappointing for me, but she went to a good college and took the calculus for engineers and ended up tutoring most of her classmates, because she'd gotten that rigor that they hadn't, she'd seen that college content that they hadn't, and it was a college course that she had a lot of success in, even without passing the AP exam. So I'm really going to look at different ways we can encourage as many students as possible to test the waters and really challenge themselves as they prepare for higher learning. Some of the data is on the next couple of slides. This printed one too many here. So essentially, this is our math course enrollment in our AP courses. We offer the AB Calculus, the BC Calculus, and AP Statistics. Over the past 5 years, we've gone from 50 students enrolled in 2017 to this year's class having 92. So we've almost doubled. Really impressive enrollment numbers. You will notice a small dip in the AB enrollment. I think where that's coming from is a lot of the students are deciding to challenge themselves even more. The BC enrollment has jumped significantly. We have 31 students, I believe, taking BC Calculus this year, and they're a great group. I get to teach them. So again, I really want to make a push for more students to join. It's a discussion that I want to start with students as young as grade 8 and grade 9. It's a lot for them to maybe take in, but at least start to hear about it. And not just from teachers. I'd love to have some students go in and talk to them. Sometimes have the teacher walk out of the room so they're not selling it, and have the student, let the younger students ask the upperclassmen, what's it really like? Where they can get an honest answer, the good and the bad. AP classes do tend to have quite a bit of work. But get an honest answer and get told that, hey, it is hard work, but you can do it. I've done it. You can do it. Here's how I did it. And have those students go home, have a conversation with the adults at home, and take a chance. Again, the enrollment numbers jumping. I want to keep it going. If we go to the next slide, okay, we're already there. The performance, there's the percent of students scoring 3 or better. Again, we see a small dip in the AB. To me, I'm okay with that. That means some of those students that are on the fringe are jumping into that class and trying it out. And not everyone's going to get a 5 on the exam. A lot of the top AB students have now challenged themselves with BC. So we're kind of seeing, some of the top go to BC and some other students fill in those numbers. That's where we see the dip. To me, I think that's totally acceptable. They're getting that college rigor. And again, the Calc BC scores, the stat scores have been very, very high over the past few years. And then average score on the next slide. Again, average score is well into the 3 area, capping over 4 in a couple of the courses for a number of years. We had a little COVID dip, as did the state. And basically, with 1 or 2 exceptions in one course, 2 courses, by a touch, we've been above the state average and the global average year after year in all these courses. So I think our AP students we're seeing more of them, and they're continuing to have great success. Mcas. Again, we are outperforming the state, but to be fully honest, there's definitely room for growth here. Positive results in 2021. We're below the state on only 3 questions in 10th grade. Only one of them was more than 4% below the state. In 2019, for comparison, we were below the state on 12 questions, and 5 of them were significant. So despite the pandemic, Walpole did a really good job keeping its students making progress. The scores in the student growth percentile held steady, and they actually in some areas increased during the pandemic, which is really impressive and says a lot about the students and the opportunities and the push that we gave them. Areas for improvement, really generally, and we'll touch on it as we move along. It to me, goes back to some of the critical thinking. As I look through the items that we struggled on, and when I say struggled, really at state level instead of significantly above it, a lot of them were higher level thinking. It was across different strands, definitely some geometry, but some of the other stuff as well, algebra. It was the questions. Mcas has obviously changed from the older one to the next gen, and they upped the level of rigor on the questions. And we need to respond by upping the level of rigor in our daily lessons and our assessments to prepare the students, again, not just for Mcas, but for the real world. Because the real world, they don't just hand you an equation and say solve it. We need to figure out how to create that equation. We need to figure out how to solve that problem. And again, it comes back to that critical thinking. So I'm going to go through some sample questions as well after looking at the data. Next slide, kind of a lot of numbers on there. I'll kind of talk through some of the highlights and areas for growth again. So what I've done here is compare us to what's called a DART. That DESE comes up with about 10 other schools, high schools in this case, that match us relatively closely for the grades they offer in their high school building, their enrollment numbers, and the proportions of special populations, students with disabilities, low income, et cetera, et cetera. I didn't list them all here because that would have been way too much data on here, but I did do the DART average and then how we compare to them. We're above the state, but we are below those DART schools, the ones that DESE is comparing us to. That's where we need to grow. We need to pull ourselves up to that level. Our student growth percentile in 2019 was a little bit low, but what I did notice as we went to 2021, where the state dropped, our DART similar schools dropped, we actually held steady with our entire population. So we did a really good job, again, during the pandemic, keeping our students involved and invested and growing as mathematicians. And I'm going to touch on that in just a second. With this, and I chose a select population of students with disabilities. That's that second, the bottom part. Again, 2019, we're definitely below some of the averages. 2021, we're still below some of the averages, but we closed the gap. And if we look at that last column, the student growth percentile, it's tremendous. Our students actually had great growth. Everywhere else went down, and our students made incredible progress, our students with disabilities. I'm not going to sit here or stand here and say that everyone is where we want them to be. We have growth still to do. We have progress to make. But I think we did some things over the past couple of years that really pointed us in the right direction. Still working on figuring out exactly what those are. I think having our students in the building last year definitely helped. And I think in some ways the pandemic caused teachers to think outside the box. It's kind of maybe one of those small hidden blessings. We had to rethink how we teach and get creative. And I think our teachers did a very good job with that. And if we can pinpoint exactly what that was and build on it and continue to build on it, I think we can continue to see this progress that we saw in 2021. We're not where we want to be, but we can get there. I think we're good with that slide. I wanted to show you a couple examples. And again, these kind of highlight at that critical thinking and problem solving. This one involves the Pythagorean theorem, which every student knows. It's an 8th grade standard. Not saying they didn't learn it in 8th grade, because they did. And they can, if this problem had been a triangle, most students would have gotten it right. But as soon as they see the square and the word diagonal, and it's that just next level. And if they're not I don't want to say subjected, if they're not exposed to that higher level thinking and that rigor on a daily basis, then they start to struggle when they see it. I would like to see students having that rigor higher than any test that would be put in front of them. So they sit and say, oh, this MCAS isn't that bad, or this AP test isn't that bad, or whatever test they might have to take. If the rigor is there on a daily basis, and that's something that I really want to aim for, is that critical thinking and that rigor. So again, we're at the state level here, but half our students getting this wrong, I think we can really, really grow there. The second one, our students know this stuff again. This was a 2-point question, and we averaged about 3/4 of a point. Again, at the state average, but again, we can do better. What we've decided to do now, and I actually did it today with my algebra class, is we did a problem like this where they opened up an MCAS sample test through Pearson online and executed these kind of problems. So they're not only learning how to do them on paper and with word problems in class, but since MCAS is on a computer, we're having them learn how to effectively do it on the computer, show their work, check their work, use the scrap paper effectively, and not just be satisfied with making an attempt. Make an attempt, check your work when you have the opportunity to, and really just good strategies for learning, good strategies for test taking, so that we can be more successful. The next question, estimation, and again, critical thinking. The question seems straightforward, but we only got about 1/3 of us getting it correct. Without interviewing students, and they probably wouldn't remember the question anyway, I think some of the issues, again, estimation and application. Instead of a graph that's a perfect linear equation, they see dots elsewhere, and they start to worry about those. The number 25 isn't actually on the graph. I think a lot of students just said, oh, the next box is 25, it's going by ones, and just really, again, the challenging problems, instead of us giving them whole numbers all the time, let's build fractions into all of our questions and all of our content and circle back and reinforce some of the skills. Our students can absolutely do these. I've seen them do it in class. We just have to get them to execute at a higher level at certain times. So one of the things that we're going to do about it, if we move to the next slide, we've been doing a number of different types of interventions. We have a teacher who we've kind of created a concrete role. She was hired, she's in her 3rd year now. She's our intervention specialist. And what was done, the iReady data from the original diagnostic that the students took, the 9th graders took in September, was analyzed, and we kind of found some of the students that were a little bit below grade level and had some gaps. And those students that had a study hall, and we could kind of create small groups and fit into a schedule. We can't get them all due to scheduling, but they meet with her once per cycle. And she has designed lessons to support them on the specific content areas they're struggling with and give them direct feedback, instruction, intervention. And it's starting to there a lot of those students that are invested in it are performing better in math and they're making recognizable progress. It's something that we want to continue. We're doing our 2nd diagnostic in the next couple of weeks so that we have the data to start putting together her schedule and the students that can meet with her and now have openings in their schedule. Maybe they have a study opening up 2nd semester. Make good use of that 2nd semester. We use the interventions for students. They can go to the media center almost any period. We have math teachers down there most periods, and they can go and get support, except for a couple courses. Some of the really high level, we may not have a teacher that's comfortable with AP Stats or AP Calculus down there every period, but everyone can be there to support our algebra and geometry students. And the National Honor Society has been very helpful in kind of, if we have an extra couple of students down there, being kind enough to dedicate some manpower or person power to help out some of the students in need. And some of the students are making great use of those opportunities. Finally, we're using the Wednesday intervention block. The math department, the math hallway is pretty busy on Wednesday afternoons from 1 to 2. A lot of students there taking advantage of the opportunity. And both these, the Wednesday blocks and during the study hall blocks during the day, can be student assigned or student volunteered or teacher assigned. So teachers that notice a student is having trouble in a certain area, they are assigning students to go to an intervention and get support in certain areas. And we really want to fine-tune that as well as possible and get the students as much support as we possibly can. Next slide. Some of our next steps, again, working on vertical alignment. K through 12, my focus will be more 6 through 12, ensuring that it's a smooth transition from year to year. We're making sure that each grade is ideally getting as much content mastery as possible, and communicating clearly with the next year's teachers. Students know what they're preparing for the next year, and really just making sure that we make the transitions as smooth as possible, especially for 8th and 9th grade. It's something that I have on my planner. At some point this year, I want to have on one of our early release days, our 8th and 9th grade teachers spend a couple hours together and really talk about the transition and the content and the expectations. And so, I think that's where the biggest gap is. Those teachers don't get to communicate that much. An 8th grade teacher can walk down the hallway and talk to a 7th grade teacher, a 10th grade to an 11th grade, but 8 and 9, they're halfway across town. So I really want to make sure that they have an opportunity to communicate. We need to implement the critical thinking in our curriculum and instruction. Students learn best if they're investigating and exploring. I've seen some awesome things as I've gone around and observed some lessons. And just seeing the light bulb go on for students when they're relating it to the real world, and they're pushed to think for themselves instead of given the information. We use Sarah Vanderwerth. She gave us some great insight, and a lot of teachers have built that into some of their curriculum, using it as activators and do-nows when students walk in, which one doesn't belong. And in theory, you could create an argument for all 4 of them not belonging, but it's really making the students think and create their own reasoning and logic. Couple great lessons from something called EFL in Mathematic. The experience first, formulate later. I watched a great lesson on students kind of discovering for themselves that vertical angles were congruent instead of just seeing it in a math textbook or being told by the teacher. They took out their protractors and they were measuring and comparing and creating a table, and just that's what students will remember instead of page 72, section 5 in their text. Again, technology, I think that's one of those blessings. Teachers were kind of forced to get a little creative. I saw an awesome lesson with Desmos that a class that was struggling a little bit got really invested in a Desmos lesson, kind of graphing their own lines and checking their homework by doing so. And everyone's work was projected on the board, but anonymously, so they felt comfortable sharing. Just some great stuff is going on. One of the other things that I've started to do is, in pushing the teachers to do, again, time is always a resource. So at some of the middle school department meetings, I'm having the grade level teams meet and develop collaborative activity. They're collaborating to create activities that they're going to use a couple weeks down the road. Take a lesson or a content area and develop an engaging activity that the students are going to investigate themselves and learn the content themselves. And the teacher's there to guide them and answer their questions, but push them to answer their own questions in a way and create, again, that critical thinking. The more we develop that, I think we'll see a huge jump in our numbers. And again, the data, we're going to use the data to inform our instruction and intervention. The Mcas data, the one issue with that is it gets kind of reactive. The Mcas data comes in, late summer or early fall, and then we're responding to it, and that's where the iReady usefulness comes in, very handy. We're going to do 3 diagnostics a year, get some real-time data, and respond to that. Common assessments give us data, as Julie and Jill shared, and some formative and pre-assessments. So that's something I wanted to give an example of, and I want to thank the teacher that did that, and kind of I've asked a number of the teachers if they were interested in it, and this teacher jumped at it and did a fantastic job. So I'll say by name, thank you, Ms. Hackett, for being my guinea pig. So she created, or the intervention specialist created a pre-assessment. What are the 2 or 3 skills that these students need to know coming into this unit that weren't covered last unit? Kind of circling back to maybe last year or 4 or 5 units ago. Quick few questions on a Google form. Let's see what they know. And then we're going to analyze the data and adjust our instruction, our assessments, anything like that, based on the results. Does the whole class need a brush up on this skill? Do these 5 students need to have a mini intervention during a class on this skill while the rest of the class works on an extension? We can differentiate a little bit and get everyone to a level playing field before we really dive into the unit. And then post-assessment and kind of analyze our results. So it's a lot to take in here. I'll kind of walk through briefly the pre-assessment slide. These are all the answers. They don't make any sense. The red is wrong, the yellow is correct, the yellow is partway there, and the green is correct. So these students had a pretty good knowledge, but we definitely see some areas where certain students horizontally were kind of lost, and certain areas, not many of them knew. So the teacher was able to kind of adjust some lessons, adjust some of the mini assessments, the formative assessments and check-ins, teach the unit better and help some of the students in need better. The post-assessment results, you see a lot more green. Still a couple questions where some red. So again, as we talk about it afterwards, how could we probably improve on those couple of topics? It's never going to be perfect the first time we try this stuff out. And how can we circle back to this content because the students may not have that mastery level that we need them to have. And the third slide here, a little bit confusing with the colors and all this. Green means right, yellow halfway there, red means wrong. Better means they did better on that question. Same means they did the same performance, and worse, they somehow unfortunately went backwards, which could be just a silly mistake. But the thing is, there's a lot more green and there's a lot of better. The students improved in just a short period of time. There wasn't a long time between these two assessments. And it's just really taking some data to inform our instruction and give our students the best support. And I believe that the more of this that we do, and it's not a simple process, and may involve some professional development, we can really help our students out a lot. In conclusion, some of our, essentially Walpole, yeah, did I lose a slide somewhere? Yeah, nope, okay, sorry. We've demonstrated a lot of growth and success in a lot of different areas, but to be honest, there's still plenty of room for improvement. As far as goals, we need to challenge our students to maximize their potential. Every student deserves that from their teachers and their schools. We need to challenge them in their coursework. We need to create flexible pathways where students can move up a level if they're having success and be encouraged to do so and have those opportunities. Provide consistent support for students to think critically and push them to do so. Get the students up at the board sharing their work. When they ask a question, give them a guiding question back. Make them think it through themselves. We need to strengthen our vertical alignment and create smoother transition for both students and teachers. I think that's about it. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation, Mr. Rodolphe. Questions from the committee for our math staff? Mrs. Gallagher? Just a
I
few
thought
questions.
that was awesome. I thought that was just amazing. And I could talk about math like all week long. So I'll try to get to the point, but it's really important because it shows the depth of the work that you guys are doing. And we have to understand that it's going to take a while for like the results to show up in Boston Magazine. The community, on the other hand, asks us about it. And now we can answer with real truth that we know, we heard it. We know that you are doing everything that we could ask you to do, really. So, fantastic. I should have started saying welcome to John and to Julie. I hope you love working in Walpole, and welcome back, Jill.
She's been here.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Last name was Graham.
Oh, dear heavens. Yeah,
We changed her last
We
name.
changed your last name.
Yeah.
well, that threw me too.
The pandemic happened, so.
Well, welcome back.
Okay.
No, but it really, it's important, and I have a couple of comments and then a couple of questions. The fact that you're talking about high expectations and you're living it, it's super important. I love the fact that you're talking about spiraling because, math is just so foundational, and if you don't have the foundation, it's really tricky. So, I understand that there's a whole bunch of standards that have to get taught, but you have to find ways to fill in the gaps for kids too. The other thing I noticed, I didn't look on the high school yet, but the middle school website is fantastic. Like, there's a lot of good information there.
Thank you.
And that's, yeah, no, but it's noticeable, it's user-friendly, it's great. So, couple of questions. iReady and Big Ideas are being used for up through grade 10, is that right? Or is it 9? It's okay.
Some teachers are using it in grade 11.
Okay. Do
we
we
do have it
like
for
those
Algebra 2.
programs, I guess? Or
There's a lot of potential. Some teachers are finding more use in it than others
okay, okay.
at the high school. I can't speak for the middle school as much.
Yeah, I definitely think we utilize big ideas quite a bit. Julie and I will use it to build our assessments, but we go outside of it as well, and we encourage our teachers to go outside as well. So it's a great resource and support for our teachers, for sure, but it's not the only resource. Is the big
Okay.
piece.
Okay, so my main question is, if we know we want to create better math students in the long run, and for this moment, pretend that budget wasn't an issue, are there resources, whether it be staffing or professional development or, I don't know, anything else that you come to mind, because we do want to be supportive of the work that you're doing. So is there anything that comes to mind right now, or if not, I would ask you to think it through, talk it over with the principals, talk it over with Mr. Hahn, because it's budget time now from our point of view. And my feeling is we've talked a lot about challenging you guys, and we have to support you. So just think about it from that point of view.
Yeah, I mean, we could go both ways. I mean, Julie and I have talked, and we continue to look for professional development opportunities. It's definitely something, and we mentioned it as well, that we would love to build in. There's things that we are looking for and trying to encourage our teachers to build into their instruction, but it would benefit them if we had the support for that as well, like opportunities for them to learn about these different strategies and be more hands-on with them, as opposed to us being like, here's this, let's try this and see how it goes, but having an opportunity for them to really sit down and dig into it with some professional development. In terms of staffing, I think the benefits it would potentially have for us is that, like, both Julie and I both teach as well as coach in our role. It could potentially create an opportunity to lessen that for us and allow us to coach more. But the other piece would be, an opportunity similar to the role, I guess, of Leslie at the high school, and being able to provide support for our special education students, as well as the special education teachers with instruction and modification of the math curriculum, having somebody that has that math content knowledge that could work with our special educators could potentially be beneficial as well.
For the high school, I would say some very similar things. Again, I've only been there for about 3 months, so still kind of getting a big picture
Of
view.
course.
But staffing-wise, I think there's definitely a potential benefit to having some teachers that are dual certified in special ed and math, that are in the math classrooms, kind of really strengthening our co-teaching and being there available to support all the students, and freeing up the teacher at times to have a little bit more time to support all the students in the classroom, the special ed students and the non-special ed students. And then again, professional development, I think there's a lot of it out there. I think some stuff that encourages our teachers to create or to use and implement these engaging activities that are going to push our students to that higher level. And ideally, and Mr. Hahn and I have had some conversations already about some ideas and some different ones. Some of them have massive libraries already, because the one resource that unfortunately money can't buy is time. And if we can pull from these resources and tweak them to suit the needs of our students best, but they're kind of already built a little bit in just this library of engaging activities, enriching activities that get students to think critically, a PD like that, I think, is almost invaluable.
Great. Well, I would just to wrap it, my end up, I could have you here all night, but I don't want to. I think it's really important for us to be able to say, you've already, over the last couple of years, met some of the expectations that we've been asking for, like the participation in the higher level classes, just as an example. It's good. And I think we should be able to feel good about the fact that we're heading in this right direction. But the leadership that you just showed tonight is fantastic. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Further questions from the committee, Ms. Sarah?
Thank you. I thought that, again, I thought it was great. I know Mrs. Galvin's the math expert. I am not at all. So my question is more around when I saw the sort of comparison between the two middle schools. I remember when my son was in middle school, there was a lot that was said about, you could kind of tell which elementary school kids came from. That there was sort of a discrepancy between, the different elementary schools. And so, as you talked about building that 8 to 9 connection, is there work being done, or as you're looking at some of those weaknesses, how do those sort of trickle down to what's coming from the elementary schools?
Yeah, it's definitely a goal that we have. We started to build that bridge when coaches were first put into place. And there's been some changeover at the elementary level with coaches that's made it a little challenging. And of course, the last year and a half has made things challenging for various reasons. But it's something we definitely talk about in wanting to look at to get a better understanding of where our students are coming from, and also to give the elementary teachers an understanding of what's coming going forward as well. So it's definitely something that we think about and work towards for sure.
Thank you.
Further questions, Ms. Denizio?
Just one quick clarifying question, but first another compliment. I think Julian, your presentation is a model for exactly what we hope to have when people come before us, not just in the presentation, but because of the substantial evidence of the work that you're doing and the context that you gave us around why you're doing what you're doing and what it looks like. That was wonderful. So thank you for that. What is the breakdown for you from your coaching, between your coaching and your teaching? How many classes do you teach?
I teach 2 full classes. Jill teaches 3.
I have 3.
You have 3. Okay. I do think that there's value in having the coaches have a little bit of a teaching load, because it just informs the coaching work that you're doing, and I think it forces you to come at it from the practitioner standpoint as well as the coach standpoint. That being said, 3 is a lot. So I'm happy. I'm glad that you brought that to our attention, and we can kind of.
Yeah, I agree.
It's not typical.
No.
We have a large 6th grade population.
Okay.
So to allow for the manageable class sizes in the connections courses,
Yep.
I have a section of math connections that I teach, which we both taught math connections last year, which we found really valuable. It really helped us to build that curriculum. So it definitely, like you said, has its benefits for us to be in the classroom for sure. We always have the 2 interventions, the 7th grade intervention class and the 8th grade intervention class. The math connections is unique for this particular year.
Okay. Thank you again.
Yeah.
Mr. Ahern?
Yeah, thank you. And just echo the compliments, especially from Mrs. Denizio, about the caliber of both the presentations and the information that was presented, and just the decisions that you're starting to make. And it's really exciting to see, the progress even over the short term that's been made. John, a question for you. You talked about the students being able to achieve if they're invested in, you guys are aware math is hard for some students,
Yes.
like really hard, and it beats their brain up. How do you do that? How do you work with teachers to create and carry that investment?
I think it comes from a couple different areas. One is creating those interesting activities. A worksheet, I don't know many students that are going to be excited about a worksheet or a problem set. Don't get me wrong, sometimes we got to do them, for practice. But especially as you introduce a topic, just that introduction of a topic, and they might not be able to get that answer. But a week later, after you've kind of gone through a couple of the lessons, the students make those connections, and then they give them the same problem, and they can solve it themselves. They come up with their own questions, their own struggles. Let's put it on hold. We're going to learn some stuff, and really just getting them involved and interested, relating it to their real world. I saw a teacher do a great job with that, with orders from Ricos. As they did systems of equations, and the students were really invested in that lesson. But the other thing is just this undying belief that students can achieve. And if you just portray that, and you show that, and you have that enthusiasm, eventually the students are going to believe you, and they're going to believe in themselves. I'm teaching a algebra class right now, CP1, and a couple of students kind of finished up the review. And I just said, okay, I'm not going to let you sit there. Here's linear programming, which is a really high level kind of thing. Gave them a brief overview, and I said, give it a shot. Try and figure it out. And the conversation that they had and the smile on their face, well, at least I imagine the smile on their face, the light in their eyes because they had masks on, you could tell that they were excited. And it's just figuring out ways, and yeah, it's tiring, it's a lot of work, but the reward is, it's great. Watching them succeed, watching them be excited, and it just comes from, having that, if you believe hard enough, most of them will eventually believe if you show it.
Thanks. And last question, so how can parents partner in this? I'm a parent of an elementary, middle, and high schooler this year. It's much easier. The math is easier in elementary school, and it's all kind of right there for you. It's a lot tougher to pull from my middle schooler and high schooler, like what they're doing and what they're thinking about, what the curriculum actually looks like. Is there a way? The math website is helpful, but are there any things that you can provide to the parents to support the students and, create that investment? Like if a kid's willing to have a conversation, like the times that it has happened, it's, projects similar to what you've mentioned.
Right.
I'd like to take a crack at this answer, if you don't mind, because this is beyond math, but I think it's protected. One of the things that was evident by tonight's presentation that we talk a lot about is this district is committed to making our math curriculum not just more accessible and not more challenging, but more rigorous and more critical thinking and real world. I mean, you saw it in these questions, you saw it in the thinking. As a result, students are going to struggle. And we need to also communicate with parents that the struggle is part of the learning. It is arguably the most important part of learning in some cases. And so parents who can work with us to embrace that and understand that the struggle is okay and it will only help with the growth of our students, I think is crucial. And I'm stressing that potentially more now than I ever have. And principals at LC, this is a place of our conversation, because while we up our expectations for our students, we expect there to be some struggle, but we expect the reward to be far greater. And so that's just something I appreciate that question, and I know that maybe it isn't necessarily a website I'm giving you or a single site that a parent can sit next to their child and help, but it might be just as important as anything that we can give in a single resource.
Yeah, and I think one opportunity, and just throwing it, and it's something we can look at doing, because I don't think it's a huge ask. As we introduce a new project or a new concept or a new problem, create an email list, and we can, blind carbon copy all the parents. Here's what we're working on in class. We encourage you to have a conversation with your student about it. And ideally, not every family with the schedules can sit at the dinner table, but in passing, or ideally at the dinner table, tell me about what's going on in math. Because I agree, sometimes math might not be that most exciting subject in everyone's life.
And I think the more you just talk about math at home, the conversation's going to evolve, right? They're not going to come, a middle schooler's not only going to come forward and say, this is what I did in math class today. But, trying to get, negative numbers. Don't relate it to school. Just talk about negative numbers in the world. And we've been playing the math level out lately, like card games. Kids don't play card games anymore. And it's amazing how many math skills you can use with card games. And I think a lot of those things then naturally start to facilitate discussion. Like, oh, do you know we did something like this in class? Even cooking with the kids. It's funny, we do all these things when they're in elementary, and we kind of lose them when they're in middle school and high school, but these foundational skills are still important, like talking about money and budgets and all of that.
Yeah, on that same note, I had done a project in my Math Connections class last year. I actually just started it today with my class this year on personal budget. And I had sent out a blast email like John was talking about to the parents to, update them on what we were doing and to encourage them to talk to their kids. And one of the parents replied back and was like, my son finally wants to know what I spend on groceries. And it's amazing. So just these conversations that can come out of it is really a big piece.
Great. Thank you. Yeah, I think anything that can be shared to spur a conversation, you know, I like math a moderate amount, but it's still hard to engage with the kids.
We have some work to do on this team, apparently.
Other questions or comments from the committee? Thank you very much. I want to echo what my colleague Nancy Gallivan said. We are obviously, as you look at the end of our agenda, our meetings coming up, we are in a budget time frame, and I cannot stress to you enough the appetite from the community and from this board to hear your needs. And as far as communication goes, I do not know a ton about math. I do know a great deal about cake. And as I think about baking a cake, we want to sprinkle in these. I and most of my colleagues read all of the weekly newsletters, and we see reports from the community. We want to sprinkle this in everywhere. I truly think, as someone who is very much like my colleague to my right, very liberal arts brained, I think that there's just tremendous, even from among us, there's this tremendous appetite to really hinge as a district towards STEM and STEAM and to support you and elevate. I mean, I remember when you joined us as a math coach, you know, and you were bringing in your sort of the first presentations to this body, and I think we would also have an appetite for you to come back with students perhaps for the beginning part for recognitions, just to tell us what we're doing. We want to spotlight this because there's a lot of work being done, there's a lot of work to do, but we're there for you, and we're glad you were here this evening. So, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Moving on into our agenda for new business, we have our solar energy presentation by Mr. David Ruggiero, who's the energy manager for Walpole in a consortium with Norwood and Sharon, and Mr. Michael Fisher, our school business manager. Mr. Fisher, would you like to begin?
When I get to it in a minute. I'll tell you when.
I have it. I'll put it up.
There's a revised one in the packet. So thank you for having me this evening. I've brought a special guest with me. His name is David Ruggiero, and David is the energy manager for Walpole, Norwood, and Sharon. His primary responsibilities are to manage the Green Communities Grant program for each community and to assist our communities in rolling out new initiatives such as EV charging, fleet development, as well as renewable energy and battery storage systems. David has a wealth of knowledge accumulated over 20 years in the high-performance building industry. He served as a construction supervisor where he was lead accredited professional, HERS rater, and a certified energy auditor. David also served 13 years at ICF International as a consultant with a focus on energy efficiency and renewable energy. David is currently the chairman of the Norwood Sustainability Commission and serves as a senior benchmarking and technical advisor for Fidelium Consulting, LLC. So clearly, David is a lot more versed in this energy discussion than I am. He is here to assist with any questions that you guys may have about how this program is set up, how other communities have done it, those types of things. So a much broader base of knowledge than I have. So I've condensed down what was in your PowerPoint down to a one-page brief summary, but feel free to ask any questions. We have a revised financial because there's one change that we talked about at our last meeting that you will see in there. Mary, if you want to pass it around. So the financials are slightly altered because at Johnson Middle School, due to the uncertainty of the building use, we're going to remove the array from the building and add in the canopy over the parking lot. So you'll see that in that financial breakdown. So David and I are here this evening to ask the school committee for your endorsement to add a rooftop solar arrays on the Fisher and Old Post Road schools in addition to a solar canopy over the Johnson Middle School parking lot. The PowerPoint presentation in your packets this evening provides a background for the projects as well as the financial information related to the program. If approved, we will be working through Power Options, which is the largest energy buying consortium in New England. The vendor approved by the consortium is Select Energy, and they will be providing all of the services from the power purchase agreement to the installation and maintenance of the solar arrays. They've done over 600 commercial projects in Massachusetts, Rhode Island, and Connecticut, and specifically for us, they've done 100 projects with public and nonprofit entities. So pretty well versed in this area.
So as far as program highlights go, Walpole will have no upfront costs and no maintenance responsibilities for doing this project. Select installs, finances, operates, and maintains all equipment. It's a 20-year power purchase agreement, which you can see in the breakdown. Select Energy manages the federal and state incentives, which can be cumbersome, to be honest with you, and they manage that whole portion of the project. Walpole is provided with savings plus a hedge against future energy costs. And we all see in the news these days how energy costs are going up and up and up. This is a hedge against that. It would memorialize that rate when we set our agreement. Pricing has been pre-negotiated with the leverage of the Power Options Consortium, so members have much more leverage than we would as one town if we went out and did it ourselves. Our representative Power Options is a gentleman named Walter Gray, who's our program manager. So both Walter and David are both on our team versus Select, who's our vendor, who is good, and Matt Shortsleeve is the person's name. I like working with him. David's had a lot of experience with him, but he is a vendor, and they are looking to make money. So these people represent us and help us figure this out and make sure it's an appropriate financial arrangement. The steps in the project are the project identification, which we've done already. We've talked about the places that we're interested. To sign the letter of intent is the next step, which could be, will be signed, if you endorse this, will be signed as soon as tomorrow. It could be, I think it's going to be Jim Johnson, but it could be Bridget if you voted to approve her. But we can finalize that. It's a very simple formality on that end. We would execute a power purchase agreement, which is vetted by the town's legal counsel. So we know that we're getting into an appropriate arrangement. Again, it's the same agreement that Power Options uses with all the other towns. And then we would seek town meeting approval at the spring town meeting. It would be a simple warrant article included within the overall town meeting agenda. And then the revised savings is the final thing I wanted to highlight. So in front of you, you can see the overall savings for the project over 20 years is approximately $805,000. So a significant savings year over year of about $27,000 to $30,000 per year on our electric bills would be saved. In addition to, and I think David could speak better to this, reducing CO2 levels. Bill, you had a very interesting question the other day about net zero. So how does solar put you at net zero? If we wipe out all the electric in the building, is it a net zero building? I think David had some good points that we were just talking about earlier that he could mention regarding that, if you'd like.
Sure. Thank you, Mike, and thank you all for employing me and inviting me tonight. Specific to net zero, the numbers that are given here account for 100% of the electric use at the buildings. But the buildings that are on this list are fueled by both electricity and natural gas. It's common to see school buildings consume about 80% of their energy in natural gas and about 20% in electricity. And both these buildings fall within those ranges. They're a little bit below 20% electric. So you're satisfying all of the electric energy needs of the schools. Not net zero, which is the design, gold standard, and the design that the new junior high would like to achieve by getting to an energy use intensity rate of 25 kBTU per square foot, if we want to get technical, for those of you who like math, and you all admitted you either did or didn't. And then with solar on top of the new junior high, you could offset that energy use, since it is 100% electric, and get to net zero, meaning you're producing as much as you are consuming. As a point of reference, the Walpole schools on average have an energy use intensity rating of 75. State average is about 65. The new junior high is looking to be at 25 and then net out. So these projects are a great way to start down the path and understand how solar works and how it can help defer costs and energy use. And if carbon, I mean, there are three equations here: energy, dollars, and carbon. In time, they all net out to zero. So, long-winded answer.
Questions from the committee? We have a couple, Mr. Hank.
What are potential costs that we could incur over time? Are there any costs that we could incur over time, except for like, I don't know, them dying at the end of their life?
The 20-year, there should be no cost because you don't own the system. You are entering what is known as a power purchase agreement. We're just buying the power that's coming off the roof. Select Energy owns the system. They own the right to the RECs, renewable energy certificates, to all of the tax incentives. Since you're a nonprofit organization, you can't claim those. So that's the skin in the game for them. They maintain the system, they own the system. After 20 years, probably language which says you can buy the system outright. And then you would be responsible for maintenance. So I've not seen any bills coming into any projects I've been affiliated with for a power purchase agreement saying, here, fix this.
And so then any costs would be associated with the buildings if there is some sort of, I don't know, weakening of the structure or something that's determined to be related to the installation or the life of the panels?
For the building itself, which is why we're only looking at a few schools right now. Select did come in and they did engineering studies on all of the schools and some of the municipal buildings. They discounted those that could not support a system, and that either through structural inefficiencies or a lack of sunlight. If there is a, catastrophic failure of, the roof, due to whatever, hail, rain. We lost Norwood Hospital due to rain. They would, you would need to incur the cost of repairing that and probably bear some of the responsibility for taking the system off line, putting it back. But those are insurance items, those are, force majeure, those are well documented. It's another reason why you would want to go with power options. They are long-standing, well-vetted, and approved contracts.
One more question. So is the estimated term savings, it's hard to project, is that like a maximum, minimum, average?
So
that
the
we
800?
Expect to see? Yeah.
Yeah, it's projected that the energy use remains constant and that there's a 1.5% increase in energy costs per year, electric energy. I know that their projections have been good for the last 2.5 years on projects that I've seen. I don't know how they'll hold up after 20, but if they're guaranteeing a rate of 8 cents a kilowatt, that's really good.
When talking to Matt, he said he generally does these in a conservative way. So they want to come in and under-promise and overachieve, right? So I think we'll be pleasantly surprised when it actually comes out with true savings.
Thank you.
Sure.
Further questions from the committee? Mrs. Gallivan?
I kind of don't know where to begin, but I like this idea. I just want to understand, like, I guess the process and the responsibility that we're taking on if we say that we want to sign the letter of intent. Because I'm looking at the list that says next steps. So the letter of intent enables the application to move forward. Does the select board have to sign, like, are they the next step? Because that's, in the next bullet, it says school committees and the select board agree to engage, select, and join the powers options. I guess I'm wondering, where are we in the process? What's town meeting about? And are we going to have to present at town meeting about, because I don't feel comfortable, like, knowing all the ins and outs. So can you tell us about that part?
Take a shot.
I'll take a shot at it. Where are we in the process? I think the letter of intent, I think we're on we're ready to go into step 2, which is to sign a letter of intent and start locking in incentive rates and funding. Had we done this 3 months ago, we would be at Smart 5. You see Smart 6 on your dead center in the little chart here.
Okay.
Which means it's the 6th block of solar funding that the state has made available through the current program. We lost about 11% savings by that delay. Had we done Smart 1 5 years ago, this number would be close to $1.6 million in savings and not the $800,000 it is now. So we are ready to start a letter of intent to lock into those savings.
Okay.
It would then go to town hall. If everything locks in, if the utilities approve of the interconnection, you're going to produce power and you're going to put it back into the grid at some point in time. The utilities have to know that their system can handle that energy coming into the grid. So once the financials and the engineering, the formal financials and engineering are done, you would need to take it to town meeting and say, can we enter into a contract to put a power generation plant on the schools? And if they say yes, the project would move forward. So the engineering studies have been done on the schools, the structural engineering. Now, in those, I wouldn't say those are easy to do. Those are the first thing you do, low cost, almost no cost. Now you need to formally step up and say, okay, let's go to the next step. And if all of that passes muster, you would go to town meeting and say, can we enter a formal contract to move forward? I believe Jim asked us to take this to the school board as opposed to the select board, since we were focused solely on school buildings and not municipal buildings. Had that been the other way around, all due respect, we would be in front of the select board.
Sure. Okay. Okay. I guess 2 other questions. You mentioned that the new middle school, when it has solar on its roof, will be able to be fully capable of absorbing the needs, the electrical needs, and it will power the school fully.
All the energy needs, that is my understanding of the design intent, yes.
So, does Fisher and Old Post have the capability of adding more panels if and when we want to make it more, when we want to make it absorb more of the energy in those buildings? I mean, I know that you can't do that overnight, but if we wanted to do that, is that how you would do it?
It's always more prudent and cost-effective to reduce energy use. I'm an efficiency guy first.
Yeah.
Renewables, I wouldn't say last, but they're pretty far down the list.
Okay.
You would want to redo all of the building HVAC systems and make them electric. Heat pump technology has come a long way. In a few years' time, Lord knows what it will be like in 5 years' time. So if you were to retrofit any building,
Right.
go electric,
Yep.
and you could cut the energy cost probably by half easily. We're doing that at the Norwood Firehouse right now. We're cutting the energy use in half by going over to heat pumps. Then you could layer on more solar, probably on a canopy. You could buy renewables. You could put a solar field somewhere. Not all sites that you own or in the world will support solar.
Okay. So it's nothing we need to worry about right now?
It's nothing you need to worry about right now.
Okay.
So,
and if we lock in right now, last time we talked about this, Johnson Middle School was on the list. And the conversation was, we're not sure what the town's plan for the use of that building is. is it possible to say that we are interested in Johnson, but not right now,
Oh, absolutely.
but we can't lock in Johnson at these rates, is that correct?
You can't, I don't know how long Smart 6 will last. It could
Yep.
be 6 months, it could be 2 years.
I see, okay, but you can't lock in until you're ready to say we're ready to go with Johnson?
Yeah, until you can guarantee yourself and
Yep.
Select Energy that you'll own the building 20 years out, or at least if you sell the buildings,
That's what I thought you were
they
going to say.
will, they'll honor that.
I think that's it for me.
Further questions from the committee? John?
Do we get access to any of the power that's generated from the solar panels, such as like if we wanted to plug in electric vehicles or things like that, like outside of like the power going back into the schools? Like, do we get to get any other, I mean, we're getting cost savings, but are they functional for us in any other way?
How best to answer that? Yeah, you're buying the power, but honestly, it's virtual.
Okay.
No one knows, if you look at a carbon equation, you've got brown electrons and green electrons. You can't distinguish between them. No, it's really, it's just not a game, it's just a math problem.
Yeah,
That's
okay.
all that it is. So yes, you'll have access to that. But at this point, the programs exist to build capacity in the industry.
Mhm.
And when I say it's cheaper to save a kilowatt of electricity than to produce it, it's gotten to a point now, after 20 years of hard work and investment, it's now become cheaper to produce a kilowatt of green energy than it is to produce one of fossil fuel-based energy. So that was the driving impetus behind, we can all thank Mitt Romney with a lot of the programs that he started 20-plus years ago and have carried forward.
Ms. Denizio?
I'm wondering if you could speak very briefly about one of the things in the PowerPoint, which is the educational engagement opportunity.
Sure.
How our students and staff might be able to interact with this initiative to further their own scientific learning.
I can do that one as well.
Go ahead. I mean, I know that there are opportunities. I talked to Matt, there are software programs, there are hardware embedded within the equipment that we're talking about that can be used as a display for students to go up and look at the power that's being produced by the panels. There's, I believe, science curriculum associated directly with solar energy, and science teachers can use that curriculum and then use it in that particular building to show them directly how it's produced and what it does. So there are definitely opportunities to do that. That was actually in the presentation, a mention of it. If you want something more specific, maybe David could elaborate. If you want to know what a particular type of.
I mean, it doesn't have to be very detailed right now. I was just curious. I
know
saw it noted and was just curious to
Right.
know a little bit about what it would look like.
STEM comes up in every conversation. You know, how do we work it into the curriculum? Almost every solar provider and almost every funding agency requires real-time tracking. So you could log on to any system in the state, actually, and track their hourly production and look over weeks, years, lifetime use or production, and carbon offsets, which is, you know, interesting when you overlay that with temperature changes and cloud cover. There are plenty of opportunities. That's the educational aspect of it. And there are software programs to help students and teachers do exactly that.
So essentially, it would be a lot of access to data that could be brought into the classroom and manipulated and compared to various things
Right.
in STEM, but it's very real world based, obviously, for students if they're looking at data that comes from, you know, the roof of
Yeah,
their school.
look up, that's where it's coming from.
Right.
Both the energy you're using on your computer and the data that you're
Right.
viewing on it.
Thank you.
Further questions from the committee? I have a few. To the educational piece, I agree. In my experience, most of them have data tickers. A lot of schools that do it stick a little LED TV in the foyer that shows exactly how much energy is coming off the roof at a given period of time, and it's often as you say, app-based. So all the kids on their Chromebooks can follow along. And I've seen lessons like that demonstrated, and I think they're highly valuable educationally to the community. I just obviously have I want to first acknowledge the fact that this didn't come about yesterday, and if not for COVID, maybe we would have been in 5 or 4, because I know the community, by joining with Norwood and Sharon to retain your services, has made this a priority, and I think it's a good one. My question, kind of close to Nancy, was I would ask us, as you looked at sites, did you look at our parking lots as well? I know obviously with canopies, sometimes steel is a limiting factor, but did you look at like the high school parking lot as a other large parking lots?
I'm picking up and running with a lot of work that you've done before, so I think you could speak to that better than I.
Yeah, I mean, Select Energy came out, looked at rooftops, because that's what we were specific about. We could ask them, and Matt has come back and done a follow-up since we all talked last week, to look at Boyden School and see if that was a viable option, at Elm Street, viable option, and unfortunately they're not for a variety of reasons. But what you're mentioning, I think, would be a nice tie-in to the building study that, we were up today doing the walkthroughs. That RFQ is out. We're going to get quotes back very soon. That would be, I think, a good question to ask those designers as we're going through that process. What's the viability of putting canopies in the high school parking lot as part of that larger project?
Yeah.
I think that would be the appropriate time for it. Unfortunately, to David's point, the longer you wait, the less you save, but it is what it is.
No, I concur, and I hope, I obviously am profoundly in favor of this, because it's, I think, the morally right thing to do to try to offset our carbon footprints, but also I think it's a tremendous educational opportunity, and also it's, part of this committee, since the override, and well before that, we talked about being aggressive and looking at all opportunities for revenue offsets and the like. So I would, as I look at the Fisher School map, I hope that this is, I support this. I hope we have another one before us soon, as in the coming years, as the select board works with us to decide what to do with Johnson, as we probably inevitably will have to replace the middle part of the Fisher School roof, which is another massive flat unobstructed area, and as we kind of look at other perhaps parking lots within the community, we're also involved in the master planning exercise community-wide. We do have a lot of parking lots, much like the one around there, so I'd love to see us be able to kind of stand on the success of these 2 school buildings in a canopy, and perhaps have some additional data and study to increase it. But I think I did some quick math. I think it's something like $30,000 roughly in savings a year, and the ability to say to our students at Fisher and Old Post in a real way, your Chromebook is being powered off of the roof, even though obviously it's going into the grid and with the EMSA. The only other thing I haven't been able to thoroughly read through the EMSA, but obviously with the BIF bill at the federal level, there's a tremendous amount of credits and incentives coming down for electric charging stations across the country. So if we could look into, especially in the canopy, if it can be, just as our middle school is going to be solar ready, perhaps if there can, you can dialogue as you move forward, if approved tonight and approved through town meeting with the vendor, to see if there could be some sort of opportunity for tie-ins with that, especially at the Johnson site. As you brought up, Mr. Fisher, we're probably going to have a lot more hybrid vans in the coming years as a district, so that need is only going to increase as well.
Yeah, it just makes sense to your point. And David and I are waiting. We were told by Eversource probably about 6-7 months ago that the incentives are coming for EV fleets, and that those incentives are going to be after January 1st. So we were waiting, and the setup and the rationale for the canopy at Johnson Middle School is in part that, right, to have electric vehicles for our special ed transportation program. As ours expire, they'll be replaced by electric vehicles. That would be charged on that site.
Right, and obviously the credits as well are huge. I know you're always trying to buy more vans, so
Exactly.
That's important. Excellent. Any further questions, Mr. Ahern?
Sorry, one more.
And Mrs. Gallivan?
How is the savings realized? Is that directly on the electric bill, or is that another form?
In its simplest form. Would it suffice to say it's just a net off on our electric bill?
It's, you'll get a bill, you'll get two bills, basically. You'll get one from Eversource for the delivery charge of what you will purchase from them. And you'll get a bill from Select for that which you purchase coming off the roof. So the savings is realized in just the lower rates that you'll be buying through Select. Will also come through when we talk about net metering. How often are the kids in school? 9 months out of the year? What happens the other 3 months? What happens during the weekends? Last time I checked, the sun is shining pretty much every day of the year, or at least photons are getting through cloud cover. So you will see a bill coming through from Eversource saying, well, you purchased 100 units of energy, but you gave us 80 coming back. So we're going to bill you for 20 straight up and then give you credit for the 80 you gave to us. So the math, and I just went through this in Sharon for the first time, it took them 6 months to get us a bill, and it took me about 6 months to figure out how it all came together. And we figured, well, at this point, we should be saving about $20,000, and we saved something like $21,500. So the math works out.
Okay.
It's net metering, you get two different bills.
Thank you.
Because you're buying from two different sources.
Yep.
Mrs. Galvin?
Okay, just to understand this, you work for the towns of Norwood, Sharon, and Walpole because you're part of the grant that we are participating in, is that correct?
Yes, each town is a designated green community.
Yep.
And each town decided they wanted someone to coordinate that.
Okay. But you don't work for Power Options or Select?
No. I'm an employee of the town of Norwood, and then under agreement, Sharon and Walpole pay a third of my salary, and I spend a third of my time here.
Gotcha, okay. So are Power Options and Select Solar the same thing? Is that just one?
No, Power Options is a nonprofit.
That's what I'm trying to get at, yeah.
Yeah, it's a nonprofit organization that started to help municipalities buy electricity, municipal aggregation, which the town has done several years ago. And they used Bay State Consulting to get that done.
Okay.
So Power Options is it's a nonprofit that helps communities, aggregate the purchase of electricity, the purchase of renewable energy services, and now they are expanding quite quickly into EV charging stations and EV fleet purchasing and financing. So it's a BJ's wholesale club for municipalities who want to buy energy wisely.
And Select Solar is a for-profit organization, is it?
Yes, they are.
And Power Options is telling all of us that it's their recommendation to use Solar Select, is that right?
Power Options will tell you that there are several companies that are
Okay.
approved.
Yep.
I'm advocating the use of Select because I know the quality of their work. I have a long-standing relationship with them. You'll use Power Options because it expedites the purchasing and procurement. You use Select because you're not going to fall victim to fly-by-night organizations and people that are going away. So you join Power Options, it's a modest annual fee. Solar membership is about $1,000, at least it was last year. Full membership is, I think, $2,500 per year, and that allows you to use their municipal aggregation and their EV services as well. You're buying contracts, pre-approved RFPs and RFQs.
Okay. All right, thank you.
That's the structure.
To further clear, it's like they're off the state bid list, the same, they're pre-vetted. Yeah.
Correct.
Further questions? Want to make a motion?
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion to support moving forward with the school solar project.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Hearn, second by Ms. Cyrek. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Abstained? The chair will call Mr. Breen.
Yes, I vote yes.
Motion carries unanimously.
Great.
Yeah. Thank you very much for joining us and sitting through. We look forward to continuing our work with you towards town meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
For your support.
We're now going to move into the fifth item on our agenda, superintendent's report. Encapsulated within that is the COVID update in the middle school building project, so we can slide concurrently into the COVID update. Ms. Garvin, if you'd like to join us.
Sure, I'll start, and then I'll let Kathy fill in terms of getting some updates here. So in terms of the vaccination update, we actually now have numbers from the elementary schools. So they're approximately at anywhere between 16 and 19%. Fisher's at a 16% vaccination rate, Boyden 11%. Elm 19%, and OPR 19%. So, but with that, we do have, students who have only received their first dose. So as they get their second dose, that'll slowly rise. In terms of the middle schools, Byrd Middle School has a 49% vaccination rate, and 49 students still have had their first dose. At Johnson, it's 47% vaccination rate, and 59 have had their first dose. In terms of the high school, we're at an 81% vaccination rate. The students are now officially at 80%. And the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education has approved the waiver request for Walpole High School, as we confirmed that the school has met the 80% threshold rate set out in the department's policy. There are a few important considerations if we move forward to lift the mask mandate for vaccinated individuals at the high school. Unvaccinated individuals are still required to wear a mask. We will support vaccinated individuals who continue to wear masks at the high school. If any cases increase, we are able to reinstate the mask requirement locally, or the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education reserves the right, following consultation with state health officials, to reinstitute the department's mask mandate if it becomes appropriate based on state and local public health data. In order to be eligible for test and stay, you must be masked. All staff and students would still need to be masked at all times on buses, as well as indoor athletic events, unless otherwise determined by the athletic association. Also, the school committee can decide any time when to lift the mask mandate. There's no expiration date on the waiver. There's not a start date or an end date, so you have that anytime. The commissioner should be providing us with an update prior to January 15th. If you remember, all students are required to wear masks until January 15th. And we are required to follow this waiver process if any other buildings in the district meet the 80% threshold as established by the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. I also received a recommendation from our Walpole Health Department. So in terms of cases and then also their recommendation. Last week we had 19 cases, and the week prior was 14 cases. The total for November was 55 cases. That's compared to last year we had 28 cases, if you were looking at comparison. This month, as of today, but I don't know, Kathleen, I haven't looked since we've been down here. We have 23 cases. From the Walpole Health Department, as they anticipated, Walpole's positivity rate continues to rise. The positivity rate for the most recent reporting period is 5.09%. This positivity rate reported at the last school committee meeting held on 11/18 was 3.45%. And I believe you have a copy. I have a copy. I can give you the positivity rate spreadsheet that shows the data from the previous weeks that we've been reporting. So they've been steadily rising since, beginning of November. The Walpole Health Department continues to stand by the recommendation to hold off unmasking our students at this time at Walpole High School. With case numbers continuing to rise and holiday gatherings before us, they feel now is not the time. In order to maintain the health and safety of our students while also continuing to provide in-person learning to the best of our ability, they feel it is critical that we leave the masks in place at this time. They believe that by extending the mask mandate, they're making a sound decision based on the current case numbers and community data that aligns with protecting the student population to the best of our ability. However, when the appropriate time comes to transition to no masks for vaccinated students, the Walpole Health Department would advise school committee to entertain the idea of providing a metric which would also be used as a determining factor when unmasking should occur. The Walpole Health Department recommends a 3% community positivity metric. So what that would mean that as long as the positivity rate in the community, if it's greater than 3%, then masks would be required. Once we fall under that 3%, and as long as the high school holds at an 80% vaccination rate, then you could go mask optional for vaccinated students only. And if you look at the trajectory and looking at the time this year of the weekly positivity rate, Walpole's been under 3, with the exception of moving from 1117 when we went to 3.46, 1124, 4.69%, 12.1 was 4.9, and 12.8 was 5.09. The rest of them since the beginning of school have been under 3%. So they look at that metric. In addition, per CDC advisory, in order to maximize protection and prevent possible spreading to others, the CDC is recommending that fully vaccinated people should wear masks indoors if you are at a substantial or high transmission. And Walpole still remains at that high risk. And I believe, Kathy, correct me if I'm wrong, the 3% was the reason that they didn't go with like a 2%, like another community's doing, is because that aligns with the state.
Right, that's when Governor Baker initially said that people could unmask. We were at 3% statewide. That was his metric.
So that's what we have for the COVID update. So I think that the school committee, you have some options. One of those options is you can either vote to go mask optional for vaccinated students. There could be a vote to, or talk about tabling it until after the holidays, or coming up with a start date pending, metrics, but then you would have to agree, with the health department's recommendation.
Ms. Garvin, would you like to?
Yeah, I wanted to add just a couple of more data points, I guess. So last year on December 10th, when we were hybrid and there were masks were required everywhere indoors at that time, by state regulations, we had 56 cases. As of 4 p.m. today, as Dr. Goff referenced, I left my cell phone in the car because I'm always getting alerts from an email, and it's always Maven telling me there's more cases. That doesn't always mean they're school related, but there's more cases. So as of 4 p.m. today, with masks really only mandated in a school setting, we've had 126 cases. So when we get a case in school, obviously we contact trace around the student or the staff member, who would they have impacted in their classroom. And right now, this week, just for this week, Monday through Friday, there are 103 students that are affected by a classroom contact that are eligible and participating in our test and stay program. And those students that are eligible for test and stay, One is can only be a classroom contact or a school-based extracurricular activity. So a household contact would not be eligible. Currently, we have 42 students who are home this week for at least a portion of the week, having to be home for 7 straight days because they're a household contact, or it's a dance class, or youth basketball, or another type of extracurricular activity. So out of those 103 students, because they're in the test and stay, as I said, they have to be a classroom contact. Our vaccinated students are exempt. They do not have to participate in test and stay. They do not quarantine. They just monitor for symptoms. And then if they become symptomatic, they then stay home and test. So those 103 students are, they're young enough or not yet vaccinated for other reasons. If we go to an unmasked situation, then, and I checked with Melissa Ranieri this morning, we revert back to the DPH rules. So DESI rules only apply if everyone's masked. So it wouldn't matter if a positive case was masked and the unvaccinated person was masked. It just wouldn't matter. Everyone has to be masked in that situation. So what would happen is those 103 students would be home for 7 days because they've been in a situation where they're unmasked and now a close contact. And so when you add up those days, those 103 students would literally miss between them 721 in-person school days. So I think when the rate is high and we're seeing so many cases daily in our school system, it's a tough time to unmask. And that's, I do like the idea of using a metric, because we're not seeing these types of numbers earlier on in the school year, and we certainly did not have 103 students participating in test and stay. So far this week, we've done 232 tests. So, and we've had 2 positives within the test and stay this week, so 5 for the school year so far. But we've done probably about 1,500 tests this school year. So it's a very, very low rate of positive cases when we do the test and stay. But we're definitely seeing, we're doing a lot more cases, testing rather. Our testing nurse is doing a fabulous job. But her original thought was 10 to 20 hours a week, and now sometimes she's doing a full 8 hours a day, so it's busy. But hopefully soon the surge will simmer down.
Thank you, Ms. Garvin. Questions or comments from the committee? Ms. Irick?
I just have a quick question about the unmasked. So would then anybody have to stay home if you're vaccinated or not?
No, if you're vaccinated, you still would be exempt from testing or quarantining.
Okay.
So yeah, you would be exempt from quarantine, and you just, again, if you develop symptoms, you do need to stay
Sure.
home until you test, but you're
Okay.
exempt. So once we get more people vaccinated, the numbers of close contacts should drop.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else? Listen. Mrs. Gallivan?
I think this would be the worst time to make a decision tonight to get rid of masks. I think the 5% is a big number. I also think that the fact that we're 2 weeks out from the break, when we know people are going to be interacting more, I just, you just hate to make a decision that then you would have to undo potentially. But one of my concerns still is to do it right so that the student or staff member who is unvaccinated for their own reason doesn't get stigmatized by this decision. So I think we could use this time to figure out, because at some point we are going to want to all agree that it's the right thing to do, but we still need to understand between today and that ideal day someday down the road, when are we comfortable saying no masks at the high school? And how do we do it in a way so that we engage families because some families are not going to be comfortable having their student go unmasked. Some families obviously will be. So how do we do it best? I would like to spend the time figuring that out, but from my point of view, tonight is not the night to be making a change.
Anything further, Ms. Gallivan? Mr. Ahern?
Just a quick question as a follow-up to Mrs. Gallivan. Has there been any work done to figure that out?
Yes, so I've been working with some of the superintendents who are gonna, in the same as us, you know, that have had the waiver, and what a couple of two other school districts are doing. The two other school districts that, one is Hopkinton that has started, they were at the 95% vaccination rate, and they did the 3-week trial, and then they're going back, masks on after the break. And there's another town that, superintendent that I'm working with, and what they did, both of these towns, is that they require permission, so the schools require proof of vaccination and parental permission, because they knew that there were some families that would not give permission, even if they were vaccinated, to not wear masks. So what they're doing is having to fill out a Google form that they have to upload and give proof of vaccination and permission. And so if the school did not have permission and did not have a vaccination on record, then the child could not unmask.
Is it no longer an option to make masks optional for all students?
No, it's a good question. No, that it's only for those students that are vaccinated. Now, we don't know what's coming out on the 15th, you know, and that'll be hopefully prior than the 15th. So it would be nice, maybe the first week we're back, that there'll be an announcement from the commissioner that we just have to see. I haven't had any date of when that's going to be. And if it'll be extended, if it'll be, like you say, that it's just mask optional when you reach the 80%, but that's not an option at this time.
Is that because that's not how we filed, or is that because the state?
That's the state. It's very specific, even in the waiver, that that is for vaccinated students only.
Okay. So even if we were to vote to amend our policy, we couldn't vote to amend it to make it mask optional for all students?
No.
DESI would then override us?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Ms. Denizio?
I fully agree with Mrs. Gallivan that it's not the time to make a decision. I think the disruption to students' education in the next couple of weeks and the possible disruption to families of whatever their plans might be over the break, I think it's not at all worth considering. And not only that, it would be going against our own health department's recommendations, and I don't support that at all. But looking ahead to a time when we might eventually vote to adopt the waiver and the optional masking, I'm wondering if anybody that you've spoken with, Dr. Goff, has any insight into how do school staff enforce a situation where certain students are subject to a policy and others are not, in a way that, one, as Mrs. Gallivan mentioned, isn't overly stigmatizing to any particular group of students, but two, isn't an undue burden on our staff, on top of everything else that they're doing every day right now.
Yeah, I think it's difficult. And I think it depends, Carrie, like on the percentage of vaccinated. I think if a school is 97% vaccinated, might have a much easier time, it's much more feasible than a school that might not be at that stage. But yeah, we're in conversations with those that have reached that threshold and how they're doing with that. Yeah, it's difficult. Doesn't mean we can't do it, but, you know.
I would also wonder about, and I don't know if we have any staff in this position, but if we do have staff that might either be themselves compromised or have a family member they live with who's compromised, who are comfortable given the current circumstances, but if the circumstances change, it would present a challenging situation for them, personally and professionally, to be in the classroom environment. I would just be interested to know if we have anybody who falls into that category and what accommodations we might need to consider for those individuals.
Further thoughts, Mrs. Gallivan?
I would just say it is a big accomplishment that we have been functioning well up until this point. So it's just like, I think, yeah, we're asking people to be patient a little bit longer if anybody is listening at 9:15 on a Thursday night. But, you know, I think we're trying to be logical, but, I mean, as I remember, we were one of the first schools to open last September. And except for a little blip at the preschool, all of our schools have stayed open. And it's because of the cooperation that we have asked from the community. And, you know, this year is much better. Scotty, I think it's great that you stayed the whole time, by the way. And you would have some insight to this, but I think this year is much more real than last year was from a student's perspective too, in that, you know, your classes are happening, all of your peers are in school, kids can move out, at the middle and elementary, they were in the same room all day long. So, you know, there are things to be pleased with. And, you know, yes, we're asking for a little more cooperation from everybody at this point, but I think it's the right thing to do. But thanks for staying, Scotty.
Yeah, of course.
Do you have any opinions on this while we're at it?
Sure. I would agree with what you're saying. I think it's obviously a difficult topic, but I think that especially with the holidays coming up, there's no reason to rush it right now. And given that this year is so much more normal compared to last year, I'd prefer to keep the school open and just function how we're functioning for now. And thank you for all your work, because the school is functioning and doing great. So,
thank you, Mr. Cameron. Mr. Hearn.
Yeah, I mean, I think there is another side to keep in mind, in that, you know, COVID is never going to go away. We're literally going to deal with different variants as long as scientists are studying the disease. And, you know, I fully agree with the Walpole Health Department's recommendation of including a metric of community positivity. I think that's excellent. You know, I would even go further as, you know, a metric of obvious student spread, if there is multiple cases going, you know, if we wanted to add additional things. But, you know, I think continuing to push it off until an optimal time, you know, at this point, it seems cyclical. There's not going to be an optimal time. And waiting for that, we could be waiting forever. I mean, there's going to be tons of, you know, feedback either way, you know, about what we do, and there's certainly positive and negatives, you know, but right now, by keeping masks, you know, and, you know, again, I understand why we're not making a commitment now, and I support that. You know, we're still doing some harm in creating an atmosphere, and not just here in the schools, but just in the community and nationwide, where you are skeptical everywhere you go. You have this air of, you know, is this person standing next to me? Could they have COVID? What's their deal? You know, there's an internal judgment that's happening everywhere you go. And, you know, it's because of all of this. And I think the sooner that we can move to a point where we can create an environment where everybody is supported, everybody's heard, everybody's valued, everybody's not being skeptical of one another, we can move to a place where we're really beginning to recover, beginning to, you know, encourage good positive relationships, and, you know, have, I don't know, joy, fun, you know, other things move back in, rather than there always being kind of a wall there. So just a comment, certainly not a criticism, but just, you know, something that's been keeping in my mind recently is just how long do we want to go?
Yeah, and hopefully, you know, when we have those metrics, where the Department of Health said, you know, under 3, and I immediately looked at the positivity rate to see, you know, said, that's doable.
Yeah,
I mean,
I
because
love
when you
that.
look, we've been under 3 the entire, except for, you know, November and December. And to your point, Sean, some other towns, did say, like, for example, like the school that we would talk about, the high school, it would be like, I think one district had less than, it depended on the size of the school, but this particular school said less than 10. You know, they had to stay under, you know, less than 10 positive cases, which is, you know, what we've been doing. So I think when you factor in all of those metrics, then you're able to. And I do have copies of those permission slips too that I can share with you as well.
Yes, sir.
I mean, I'm in agreement. I think that, you know, we've done a really good job, and let's just keep it, at least for the, you know, semester. Let's go through the holidays. I mean, our next meeting, I think, is mid-January, so it is a long time. We'll have some information about what's happened through the holidays, so I think we table it until then. And I think that the 3% is a really good metric to keep in mind, because, you know, our last meeting was like, oh, we're kind of creeping up. Maybe that's not good, but we've increased a lot since the last meeting, and that's really concerning.
Other questions, comments from the committee? Mrs. Gallivan?
I guess I would just sort of tie up what other people have been saying too, is if we can look towards January to say, what do the professionals say about the metrics that we want to use or should consider? And how would you implement it if in fact we were ready to say, you know, now is the time? So if you could sort of think about that in your spare time.
And by that time, I know our meeting's on the 16th, and 15th is the mask deadline, so we'll have some information prior to that as well.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, sorry to not raise my hand and request a comment, but, you know, I feel like at that point, you know, Desi will have whatever it is, and we should have, you know, at that meeting, a really sound plan of action for us to go forward. And whether it's the recommendation is, you know, we have metrics in place and we do this, or, you know, cases are still high, or Desi's continue to, you know, be inflexible and make this all horrible, you know, we'll have an idea and be able to make a plan to go forward.
No, thank you, Sean. I think to that point, you know, we've Dr. Goff has been able, through her cohort as well as, you know, your kind of deep connection with your colleagues, to share best practices, and we love stealing a good idea here in Walpole, number one, and number two. I think the last year and a half we've sort of seen it's like a week before, 10 days before, you get some sort of smoke signal from Desi, as if it was the Vatican, giving you some sort of indications on where to move. So that seems to follow up with our timeline. Ms. Sarek, it sounded like you had a motion to table. If anyone would like to second, I have a second from Ms. Denizio. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Abstain?
Mark, hold on, let me get Mark.
I'll call. Chair will call. Mr. Breen?
Yes. Bill?
Yes, was that a yes?
I vote yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Motion carries 5-1-0. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kathy.
Thanks, Kathy, we appreciate you staying.
Do you want me to finish my piece up and then go?
Yeah,
back to-
sure.
Sure, it's just, most of it was COVID. Just a reminder to everybody that we are in the process of preparing the budget for the next school year. We did have a budget workshop with our Leadership Council and School Committee. It was last week, wasn't it? Just seems like it was, yeah. So beginning next week, Mr. Frisha and I are meeting with each member of Leadership Council to discuss the goods and services budget, as well as continuing our conversation with personnel needs, and budget hearings begin in January. Also a reminder that tomorrow's an early release day, that we have staff training, and then Scotty did a great job talking about all of the concerts that are coming up, and there are middle school concerts as well. And I also finally, another reminder that we're meeting for the Fales Leach Kunde Scholarship on Monday, right, the 13th. And I also wanted to share my screen here in a second. As you may remember, at an October school committee meeting, I spoke about the John D. Langley Foundation, whose primary mission is to fund requests for extracurricular and enrichment opportunities for children and teens with financial needs, or looking at the social and emotional well-being of our children in the Walpole public schools. I really want to thank them for their donation at the Daniel Feeney Preschool last month. They donated 3 communication boards, and if you're not familiar what a communication board is, it's a way to help our playground be more accessible for children with communication delays. Children point to pictures on the display to represent their thoughts, their feelings, and their needs. And the symbols on the board were taken from a communication project called Touch Chat or Board Maker, and I'll show you what it looks like here. Present it. So you can see, and they, speech and language pathologists actually selected the specific symbols specifically for the use of the playground. And the boards really allow for especially nonverbal children to communicate, and it's a welcome addition to Feeney Preschool, and allows children of all abilities to have this positive experience on our playground. So I want to just publicly thank the Langley Foundation for this contribution, for Signorama for the installation, and to our teachers and Mrs. Martin for creating the board. And as soon as she brought it out, you can see that image of the student just went right up and started using the board. So, and there are 3 posted around. So Mr. Hahn and I went up when they presented it. So thank you to the Langleys. We appreciate everything you do. All right. That's it.
Going back to calendar. Next, we have 3 related agenda items back to new business. The first is the 2022-2023 school year calendar. First reading, we have enclosed in our packets, just for our vast listening audience at home. We generally, things like this in policy, we read multiple times. It actually is a historical process that goes back to when there was no mimeograph machines, and they would have to read things multiple times publicly for everybody to get a handle of what they were doing. So that was your tidbit for the day. But we started early too. This is a 6. Just throwing it out there. It would be like 10:30 right now.
But this is just a first reading. It's the proposed draft, and you'll see that it proposes that the teachers return on Monday the 29th, and then students in grades 1 through 12 would return on August 31st, and then pre-K and K would return on Tuesday, September 6th, and then you see the last day of school, barring snow emergency days, would be Wednesday, June 14th. So this is the first reading, so just for you to have, and we need to remember that this date, the start date, is subject to approval vote of the Walpole Teachers Association.
Okay. Mr. Ahern?
This to me seems traditional, like we've had the last few years. Is that the case?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
No surprises.
Just want to make sure.
No surprise.
Our second order of business under calendars is the 22-23 school committee meeting calendar. We have a first reading of.
That's a first reading, too. So just to take time to look those over, and I think if there's any recommendations for changes, to give those to Bill and Kristen. Okay.
Obviously, Thursdays, 2nd and 3rd generally of the month, and moving forward. And finally, we have our start end times first reading for the 22-23 year. We have a list of, represents the school year for 22-23 with a switch of elementary school start times. As also listed, we, as people know, we have 4 elementary schools, and 2 start early and 2 start late, and after 3 years, we switch so that everyone gets 3 early years and 3 not early years, which affects me deeply, trying to get to work out of Fisher 3 out of the 6 years. This is obviously going to be it's a very crucial first reading, because we want, it's here this early because we really want to give people as much lead time as possible. This obviously has a strong effect on daycare situations and morning routines and the like. So, anything further, Dr. Goff?
Yeah, so exactly, Bill, that we wanted to let families, that was the one recommendation that the community made, our families made, that, when the 3 years are up and it's time for the switch, if you could please remind us sooner rather than later. So because of that, Boyden and Fisher will start at 8:55 and end at 3:25. Elm and OPR will begin at 8:25 and will end at 2:55. So again, it's those, and parents that obviously have been through know about the switch. It's to make sure that we continue to get that information out. So we'll get that out through the principal e-notes, through, my superintendent update, which I'll probably get out next week. But just to continuously remind people earlier rather than later this time around.
Me too.
I'm just anticipating a question for the families who utilize the extended day program. Does the change in start and end time have any effect on the extended day program hours at the schools?
It would stay.
Will the change affect the hours of extended day? So, it'll flip. So if the school ends earlier, extended day will be available once that school day ends, depending on the school. So I don't know if that's what you're getting.
No, I guess what I mean is, so at the early schools right now, extended day starts at 7 a.m. in the morning.
Right.
Once that school becomes a late school, does extended day in the morning start later, or is it still available at 7 a.m.?
Still 7.
And 6 p.m. is still,
Right.
regardless, the cutoff time?
Yes.
Okay.
That's a good point, Carrie. I'll make sure that when we do the
pay
communication, that
more
we say there's
depending
no
on the-
change to extended day hours.
Anything else on school start time swap? Seeing none, moving rapidly on. Superintendent's report we knocked off, so middle school building project update. Dr. Goff, Mr. Green.
Mark, you want me to take this one?
Yes, please.
No, just as we mentioned, the last time that the Walpole Building Committee, School Building Committee will meet regularly, I think we have a meeting on Tuesday. And just continuously, and we've been meeting with the designers, we'll continue, we're having like a central leadership meeting with them next week, just to make sure we're all on the same page, get some questions answered, and then being able to meet with the various stakeholders. So we'll just keep the community involved, and the project website is going to be updated, because that also needs a refresher, and people can still submit their questions.
That's it. Anything further? Seeing none, subcommittee activity? Mrs. Galvin, you want to start off?
I just wanted to say, related to budget, I want to reach out to our legislators to talk to them about the potential for state funding. So if that's okay with the committee, I'm going to reach out this evening
Absolutely.
or tomorrow.
Please do. Ms. Denizio, anything on master plan?
The master plan, community input options that were available online closed last Friday, the 3rd. And for my own monitoring, they seem to have had a pretty robust level of participation. The next master plan steering committee meeting is December 28th, where I assume we will be getting a summary from the consulting group about what the community forums showed, what the emerging themes and concerns were. So I should have something new to report when we meet on the 13th.
Excellent, thank you. Anything further? We have a superintendent evaluation in a couple of weeks as well, so we'll have a report for that at our next regular meeting in January. Is that right?
We did have a curriculum subcommittee meeting.
did.
I think in between, lose track of all the days. But we discussed the early literacy screening that we've talked about a few times and what that's starting to look like. We had a preview of the math data that we heard this evening. And talked about who's going to present for curriculum in the next few meetings.
And we have another one that we're going to set up.
Soon, it's been set up. Yep.
That's right.
Excellent. Nothing further on subcommittees. Moving on, Mr. Ahern, would you like to take it away with warrants?
Yes, so I'd like to make a motion to approve the following expense warrants for the amounts listed in your packets. They are 222021, 222022, and 222023.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Ahern, second by Ms. Nizio. All those in favor? Opposed? Abstained? Chair will call Mr. Breen. Yes, very good. 600. Next.
We are not paying people today.
Oh, sorry enough.
So I will make a motion to approve the following gifts and donations to Boyden, Fisher, Elm, Old Post Road, Bird Middle School, Johnson Middle School, and Walpole High School from the Junior Women's Club of Walpole. Nurse supply donations, $100 per school, totaling $700. To Boyden, Fisher, Elm, Old Post Road, Bird Middle School, Johnson Middle School from Bay State Textiles Recycling, the amount of $300. To Old Post Road School from the OPR PAC, Junior Great Books in the amount of $742.07. And to Daniel Feeney Preschool from the Condev DBA Conrad's Restaurant Dinner Night Fundraiser, $350.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Nizio, second by Ms. Cyrus. All those in favor? Opposed? Abstained? Chair will call Mr. Breen. Yes?
Yes.
Very good. 600. Minutes.
I would like to make a motion to approve the following school committee minutes. The November 18th school committee meeting minutes, the November 23rd curriculum subcommittee meeting minutes, and the December 2nd school committee leadership council meeting minutes.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Sarek, second by Ms. Nizio. All those in favor? Opposed? Abstained? Mr. Breen?
Yes.
600. Just have one citizen's comment. We don't want to let the evening end without recognizing yesterday was the 10th anniversary of the 29th birthday of our friend and colleague, Mr. Sean Ahern. So, you missed singing by a day, Sean.
Yeah.
I hope you had a wonderful day with your family.
Yes, thank you.
Happy birthday. Anything further? Seeing none, Mr. Breen?
That's good, because I only
Motion to
have
adjourn.
2% left on this.
Excellent. Move to adjourn. Second. All those in favor? Opposed, abstained. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Very good holiday. Take care.